This episode of the BREWtally Speaking podcast is brought to you by On Point Pomade. Keep your beard and hair looking on point with their line of pomades and beard oils over at onpointpomade.com. Use our code BSP15 at checkout and get 15% off your total purchase order. So thanks again to On Point Pomade for sponsoring our show. This episode is also sponsored by the Bean Bastard Coffee. Head over to thebeanbastard.com and pick up any one of their delicious hand-roasted coffees. Coffee lovers will also enjoy their hand-cut and handmade espresso candles and soaps as well. If you're in the Buffalo, New York area, head to their store located at 448 Elmwood Avenue. And thanks again to the Bean Bastard for supporting this show. BREWtally Speaking podcast is proudly sponsored by Rockabilia.com. With over 500,000 officially licensed items in their online store, you're guaranteed to find something you need. Use our code BREW and get 10% off your total order. Now on to the show. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the BREWtally Speaking podcast. I am your host, John. Well, you know what? Damn it. This isn't another episode. This is episode 300. It is a milestone. We celebrate those here on occasions when you reach them, because why the fuck not? And this episode's guest is actually going all the way back to the beginning. It is Mr. Christopher Bettley, my really good friend and tattoo artist. He was actually the first episode's guest of the podcast, the pilot episode, if you will, as well as really being the man behind me starting this. As we said in the first chat, and I think we said in this one too, a night at the bar at Mulligan's, a local watering hole that we used to go to, was the impetus for, him telling me that I should start this podcast versus the one I was doing previously. And I really have to thank him for pushing me to go on this journey. It's taken me to a lot of different places. It's afforded me to meet and talk to so many amazingly creative people. And it's just wild to think over the, I think 5 years at this point, where the podcast has gone and taken me. And the thing about this conversation specifically that I think is interesting is, when listening back to it yesterday, to level it out and all that kind of stuff, it felt very me heavy. And I was a little bit bummed about that at first, because I feel like the first conversation that I did with Chris was a lot more focused on him. And that's typically what you want, when you're interviewing someone. But then I kind of realized, I don't necessarily feel like I interview people anymore. I just have conversations with people. And sometimes a conversation is a little bit more dominated by one person. And then, you give the other person their chance to talk at length about something. And I feel like this is really actually a great example of Chris and I, how we are when we're just sitting down, having a couple of drinks like we did during this chat, and just talking. There's no agenda. There's no motive for anything. There's no, nothing's off the table. We just go. And a lot of times we do talk about the things that we go through with this. I know there have been times where, Chris has kind of told me some things and I've kind of given him a different perspective other than the one he has working through his own stuff. And there are a lot of times I will go to him and I'll be like, man, I've been thinking about this, or this thing in my life has happened. And, he kind of helps me work through some stuff. And it's really an audio snapshot of our friendship and why I love Chris as a person, why I think he is just one of the most kind, selfless human beings I know. I wish everyone knew Chris the way that I've gotten to know him over being friends for probably like 15 years at this point, or maybe a little bit longer. And the sad thing is, as Chris and I had kind of said in this conversation, we're at the age where you kind of don't need new friends. You don't need new people. You have your core of who is important to you, and to have, and I know Chris feels the same way, but it's like to have someone like that has that tenure with you as a friend who has been through some shit and has seen you at your lowest and at your best, and just wants nothing but the best for you. It's really magical, and it really makes you appreciate those kind of friendships. So this is a big gushy love fest of me talking about one of my best friends. So without further ado, episode 300. This is me and Christopher Bettley having a conversation. Talk to you on the other side of it. Well, it seems a bit befitting to have episode 300 literally start where the podcast started. Here in my dining room table, across from someone that I've known for longer than I think either of us want to admit, because then it tells us how old we really are.
Long time.
But yeah, in preparation for 300, I had a lot of ideas as to, it'd be cool to do this. It'd be cool to get this person on. It'd be, like a way big guest, to kind of celebrate it. And I realized in kind of thinking back, there was an episode I did where I had William Duvall of Alice in Chains on.
Oh,
and I was like...
That's so cool.
And the funny thing is that when I had him on, it was just like, we dropped it like a couple weeks later. And a few other people that ended up doing press with him, it was like, this is episode 100 or this. Like, they made a big deal about it. I was like, oh, I feel kind of like a dick. Yeah. Like that, but then I kind of thought about it a little bit more, and I was like, to a degree, there really shouldn't be an emphasis on someone being bigger or more important than somebody else.
Yeah.
And when I kind of thought about it like that, I was like, well, then maybe I think the thing to show...
Didn't my wife put that bug in your ear?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
She had kind of said something, but I also think it was kind of the more... I had been thinking about it because an idea I had was to do 3 phases of 300.
Right.
And you're going to possibly hear my dog barking at things. Which is actually on par with where the statement I was about to make, which is, you were in the first 300, then it's like you go from 201 or 200 to 299, and then you grab someone that was like the best of that, and just kind of going forward.
Right. And
kind of really getting a do-over per se, but just kind of full circle momenting it, because in life you don't really have a whole lot of those. You don't really have the opportunity to, I don't want to say redo, but just kind of reconnect. And that was something that you and I had talked about in doing this when we had done ours, was that...
Well, it's insane, man. I was actually going to say that when you had first, when we talked about it, that I was just like, I was super proud of you that you did all this stuff. 300 episodes, man. This was all about me just kind of complimenting you in a bar, just saying to you, like, listen, man, like, you should do that. Because the one thing about you that I liked is that when you would poise, like, questions to people, your questions weren't that lame vanilla, you know what I mean, where you're just like, so how did the band form, or so like how did that, you're like no, it's like you had this great way of really digging at people. And I remember watching the video ones and some of your YouTube stuff where literally like the artist would stop and go, that's a really good question, you know what I mean, like, and I was like, and that I think is your talent, is like, you're very much, you have a very good way of just not doing the run-of-the-mill crap. And that's why I was really happy. Dude, 300 episodes later, that's amazing. That's, and the fucking level of people you've had on this, man. Like, holy shit. Like, guys that we were like, I'm like, who did you get? You got fucking the guys from Korn, you got the guys from fucking, As I Lay Dying, like all sorts of crazy shit. I'm like, holy, it's blew my mind.
Well, it's something you actually kind of hit on, because, what's been happening more with these is that they've been more just organically conversations happening, and they're they're just being recorded.
Yeah, you just started up, man. You just, like, just so people, like, know who aren't hearing this, he just pushed enter and just started. He was like, and so I was like, holy, all right, we're going. There we go.
But I think the interesting thing about that is I think it lends to more interesting conversations instead of a style I kind of adopted before where I would write a bunch of things out and I might have a singular question and I'd build around it.
Right.
And then, so this is kind of a little inside baseball as to how my process of being quote unquote creative is I would go, okay, that's a good question. And then I try to build on either side of it. And very much like writing a book or whatever,
right.
I knew that here's my middle, but how do I get there? And then how do I transition into a smooth ending if I have 30 minutes or
right.
an hour or whatever?
Yeah.
And, you know, I don't think a lot of people know that I would do that because it sounds natural. But then I would go, well, you couldn't get here to here if you just ask those questions. It feels disjointed, and,
right.
and that's not how a real conversation works.
It's almost like a sequence in a movie where it's
right.
like, how do we get from...
I storyboarded
right,
a conversation, basically.
Exactly, yeah.
I Kevin Smithed it. And it was one of those things where, you know, it got a lot of really great things out because I like to over-plan and over-prepare. But something, you know, I like about a lot of the podcasts I listen to is they're just more natural conversations. You know, a little bit about someone, and then you just kind of go.
Right.
And sometimes it's in that magic of the in-between.
Sure.
And that I think the real interesting stuff comes out of. And I, you know, often think about the conversation you and I had. I literally had no notes. I just sat across from you and I talked to you.
Yeah.
And so I was like, if I did that on episode 1 and the magic was there, you can literally hear it. It's like, why would I deviate from something that obviously works? I just need to be more comfortable with myself.
Right.
And I think that's something, and, you know, a question I'll pose to you, because in basically 5 years now of this happening, a lot has changed, I think, for both of us as people in our lives. Like,
oh, yeah.
At this point now, like, you're married.
Yep.
You legitimately own your own shop now.
Yep.
Like, it's just you. And, you know, something that you had commented on a mutual friend of ours' Facebook post recently was, you know, they were looking for help with a therapist. Like, they're like, my therapist is fine, but, like, I just don't connect with them the way I feel like I need to.
Right, right.
And, you know, I offered a little bit of the help I had gotten through, you know, BetterHelp. And it worked for me. And then, but I was kind of surprised. Like, you were like, here's this book.
Right.
And I think that's a little bit more telling of you and your personality.
Yeah.
But there would have been a time I don't even think you would have posted that out in public. Like,
no.
Like, even just the fact of, I read this book.
Right.
It helped me. Maybe it can help you figure out your journey or whatever.
Right.
And I was thinking about that in conjunction to how therapy has helped both of us in our lives very recently, it seems.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that book was like Anxious to Please was this book because, you know, right when I got out of college, you know, it's like all of a sudden, like, anxiety became like this new thing. And I remember, like, I was trying to, I don't know what the right word is, but it's like I was trying to mitigate what was happening. So then it becomes like, you know, you start, like, you know, smoking weed or you drink, or, you know, you're self-medicating and whatnot. And so I literally just said to myself, where I don't want to do this, because I started noticing to myself that I was, you know, like, well, I went to a doctor and I said, hey, I'm nervous. And they're like, well, here's, you know, like what they would use to, here's some Xanax, you know? And so then I started abusing it, you know, where it became where I just had it. And when I mean abuse, I don't mean like I was just like popping those all the time, but it started to become this cycle of, before I would just have it on me, and then, you know, then it was, okay, I'm going to be in a nervous situation, I'll take one preemptively. And then it just became, okay, I know I'm going to do this, or I know I'm going to be in these situations, so I'm just going to take one there. And then the amount started to get more, where it was like 0.25 milligrams. By the end, within a year and a half, I was at 2 milligrams, which is like the maximum dose you can take without being in a hospital. I mean, like, they'll give you like a 5 milligram, but that you'd be in a coma. I mean, like, it'd knock you out. So anyways, and I remember the day that I realized that I didn't want to do it, and this is when I bought the book. Is when I was doing laundry, ironically, because you were just doing yours, and there was wears on my jeans where the pill bottle was just sitting in my pocket, and I was like, do you want to fucking be like my age now? Like, you want to be 40? You want to be 50 years old and be fucking on these pills? I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. So, and I've always, I guess, maybe a little pat on my own back. I'm very happy with myself that I have a good way of my brain has a very great way. As long as I find a new matrix to build around it, my brain kind of goes, okay, that seems logical, let's go with that. And so I bought this book called Anxious to Please, and it talks about the false fear. And that's really what anxiety is. Everyone thinks anxiety or anxiety attacks or panic attacks or something like that is this weird phenomenon. It's actually a natural response, is where when you're in danger or you feel nervous, your body starts to give you signals of like the sweaty palms and your heart and all this stuff. But it's not doing it to cripple you. It's telling you, hey, it's fight or flight time. Do you want to deal with this? Do you want to run away? You only got two options here. And so it talks about the false fear, and it kind of changed my life, because this is, I'm not a doctor, I want to speak out of school, but people would say, I suffer from panic attacks. And I always say, you probably don't. You probably suffer from anxiety attacks. Panic attacks is an adrenal gland problem. It's like you can get that fixed with surgery. But most people, it's like 95% is anxiety. An anxiety attack, which can be corrected through therapy and psychological stuff. And so Anxious to Please was like that, saying like, get comfortable. Because guess what? If you're an anxious person, even if we get out all the stuff that's making you that way, it's probably going to be your first response for the rest of your life. You just have to find a way to run through it. And so, this is so stupid, I'm sharing this, but the thing I'll say to myself every single time, and it's very morbid, is that I'll say every time I get anxious, I'll just be like, nothing's permanent, everything ends. And that makes me feel it, because, most anxiety, it lasts like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and then it rolls off you. But what happens is that it'll last longer because you don't have anything to stand on, and you'll just you ramp yourself up. You know what I mean? You're like, oh, my hands are sweating. Oh man, my heart's kind of going. Oh, fuck, there's that person I don't want to see. And you start ramping yourself up, where to me, I just would kind of sit in it and really experience it and go, I'm not going to let this dictate how I'm going to deal with the situation. And then I would say, nothing's permanent, everything ends. And it helped. It was weird.
It's funny because while not the same triggers, basically, as to why my thing, that kind of the hang-ups I was having. But it's funny because it's essentially, mine was more not setting boundaries or not adhering to them when I set them, because then, the confrontation. But even beyond that was more of what my therapist would call cognitive behavioral therapy or whatever. Where for me, I would be more apt to think of something, and then I would try to solve that, and then I would try to think of the next thing that would come, and the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing.
Right.
And the way that they showcased it, that I felt dumb when I looked at it, because I was like, well, it's not that many. But then I was like, because it was like, come up with something where you would fill all these cogs that are basically running the main problem.
Right.
So it's like
fueling that, that wheel.
So it's like if you didn't think of these 7 other offshoots, you wouldn't be able to, the one big problem wouldn't be able to keep turning other ones, because you wouldn't be looking for deviation.
Yeah, kind of choking out the first, almost like if you were to take a snowball at the top of a mountain, it's like, how do you not just roll the snowball? Like, stop it from the start. Almost saying, choking
and
off.
So it's one of those where, even today, it's weird how literally the last hour before this is now already informing the first 10 minutes of the conversation. But, I was talking to a fellow podcaster, and he was like, hey, this episode you did, because I dropped a holdover episode because we're doing this now, and then some other things fell through of how episodes are supposed to drop, because I wanted this to be 300.
Right.
And so I was like, oh, fuck, scrambling around and changing things up. And then, I kind of got everything in line. But I put out an episode I had done within the first probably year, this, yesterday, as of when we're recording. And he goes, it's funny because, I can tell how much you've changed and how much you've grown as a person doing this. And he goes, because, one of your first questions is like, oh, so how's the tour going? I was like, he goes, and I hate that question. I was like, oh, I hate that question too. And I was like, if you actually listen, another 30 seconds beyond that, the reason I asked is because the band at the time had just literally gotten into an accident, the day before or 2 days before. Right. So it was just kind of more like a segue to I didn't want to just straight up be rude and ask that question, but that was the more interesting thing about something that just happened to them while on tour.
You have changed a lot too, and it's perfect example is people ask me all the time, how did you get good? How did you? I'm like, go do practice, repetition. And the same thing, you can look back at your old podcast. I'm sure some stuff makes you cringe. You're like, oh, I shouldn't have done it like that, or God, my recording doesn't sound the way it should. You know what I mean? It's and now you're polished. You put 5 years in, and you put 5 years into any craft. If you haven't seen, a betterment to yourself, then you probably should just give it up. But you're doing great.
But it was funny because as he was making a comment about that, he goes, oh, I was listening to the episode you had done with Marcos from POD, and toward the end, he was making a comment about how you know, he was excited to do this interview. He was, you know, da da da, and you guys like we're homies now, and you're just like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
And I was like, he goes, you still have this sense of like not belonging or something. I was like, yeah, you know, I dealt with that in therapy, and I think it really stems from, sorry, that's our puppy wanting to go outside because it's outside, and essentially wanting to. Like, where does that come from? Why do you still feel inadequate? You've been doing this for 5 years. Like, you've talked to some of the biggest people. Like, why do you still feel like, oh, I don't know? And I was like, you know, I mean, as much as it always does, like, stems back from...
I've never felt comfortable in my skin.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's, you know, not taking anything away from my dad or anything like that, but it's like, you know, we grew up in the generation where it very much was, you got an A, you didn't get an A+.
Yeah.
And it's the like, and
Same.
and I understand that it's the goal of that, the function of that is to never settle. You can do better, but then the flip side of that is when you're
This
so
pressure of
you're
perfection
like,
almost.
It's like when you equate it into grades like that, where it's like I had a 95%, I got an A. Well, you had 5% more to where you would have been like the best.
Right.
You didn't get it, and it's almost like. There's a few different ways you can take it. I'm going to be motivated to do better, which, you know, is a thing, but I also think it sets this unnatural level of expectation of, well, then it's a failure. And
Right.
I'm not good enough or whatever, or
Right.
people are better than me.
Right.
And so
then you start punishing yourself instead of motivating yourself.
yeah, it's almost like atoning for not living up to somebody else's standard of who you should be or what's expected of you.
Oh, yeah.
And so to me, like when I kind of was thinking about that, I was like, you know, yeah, I've been doing this for 5 years and there's still people I'll talk to and, you know, there are friends I have, but I'm still like, it's still hard for me at times to be like, no, I am good enough. Like, it's like that Stuart Smiley thing. Gosh darn it. I am good and people like me.
Right.
And it's like, it's hard to do that. And like the natural thing I'll do is kind of deflect. And it's weird because it's like, you know, I joke all the time with my wife because she hates getting older, and I'm like, I love getting older because like you have to earn it.
Oh,
like, you have to earn being older.
Yeah,
like
for sure.
And
Every year's a victory, you know. You made it. You made it.
I mean, in light of, you know, now we're at the age where like family and friends are dying and stuff, and it puts everything into perspective. But that was another weird thing about therapy for me was, you know, telling stories about someone and they're like, oh, how did you resolve that? And I go, oh, that person's dead.
Yeah.
Or we're like, oh, what about your brother? Oh yeah, he died when I was like 2.
Right.
And he was like a few months old. And they're like, oh. And
okay.
it was just like, so to me, like death isn't a big deal because I've been around it so much in my life, but it's weird that it's not that way for other people. And I think that's the thing therapy taught me was looking at things from a slightly different perspective than the one we're used to.
Right.
And that life isn't happening at or to us. It's kind of happening at us.
Well, it's back to your thought there with you know what was, goddamn it, you were talking about before, just like the, you know, the not belonging and feeling like, you know, like you're not there and stuff like that, and or that you don't belong to these like groups, you're not the cool kid or whatever, is, you know, I've said, like, you know, I was never part of that, and there's the, it's weird because it's like there's this weird teeter-totter where it's like there's the confidence and then there's the ego and the egotistical, you know, and then there's the humble and then there's like the punishers, you know what I mean? and they're these, like, because it's okay to be confident, but there's a certain level of ego that you have to fuel to be confident, but there's this tip where then you get egotistical where you're like, then everything you do is awesome. And then the same thing, being humble is being like, I can, you know, you're being receptive, you're taking in criticism, and it's like, and you can say, okay, I can be better, I can do better, you know, it's like, I'm never going to be there. But then there's also punishing where it's like, I'm never going to be good, I'm never going to be this, you know. And I see people do that, and I always try to say, like, the best thing I can say is, like, be your own best friend as best as you possibly can be. And your best friend will tell you sometimes when you're fucking up. But he also will tell you how amazing, he or she will tell you how awesome you are when you're kicking ass. And that's what I mean. It's like, be your own best friend. Give yourself a pat on the back when you do good. You know, always know that you can do a little better, but also don't, you know, fucking smash yourself into the dirt when you're down. Just be like, okay, what went wrong? This and this and this. Okay, let's rectify that. Let's try not to make that mistake again, and you move on. And to your idea of this, it's so funny that you just brought up death, because I was actually thinking that on the way in, is where someone asked me, like, not even like 2 weeks ago, they said, what's your greatest fear? And I always said death. And they said, and I go, and not the way that you think. Like, I'm not afraid to die. I'm afraid to go with grace, I guess, is that, religion, I'm going to go on a whole crazy tangent, but like, so this is one of those where, I was a staunch, like, atheist, agnostic, nihilist even, like an esoteric nihilist. And my favorite thing in my 20s was I loved to freaking just poke holes in religious ideologies. And theists and deists, I love just to be like, well, like, how do you explain this? How do you explain that? So anyways, I get out of my 20s, and I realized in my early 30s that I was like, you're kind of cavalierly dismantling someone's kind of how they go to bed at night. Yeah, like how there's like, I'm gonna see grandma when I die. I'm gonna see this person. Where it's like, yeah, like, and again, like it's a terrible thing to do, because there's some people who they've really wrapped their whole brain into that, and like that's essentially what faith is. It's like this leap of like, I don't have a lot of evidence for this, but I really believe it. But anyways, so then I always put my faith in like science and stuff. Well, as I've gotten older, I'm gonna be 40 this September. Science may give us a factual observator, meaning it's observing things that are obviously happening in nature, but it doesn't give us the real whys either. And this is always my example I use. Water freezes at 32 degrees Fahrenheit, right? They go, why does that happen? Well, we know the molecules at 32 degrees slowly slow down, and then they solidify, so a liquid becomes a solid. Right, but I go, but why does that happen? They go, why not 30 degrees? Why not 38? Why 32? And they're like, well, we just know that's when it happens. I go, so it's a fact that water freezes at 30 degrees, but do we know why it actually happened? No, we don't. And that's not a spiritual take. It's just, there's no solace either in freaking science. So I said to myself, I don't want to be on my deathbed, hopefully, knock on wood, if I get there. I don't want to be on my deathbed and looking at the people around me, and I'm not going to be able to say goodbye, because all I'm going to be doing is screaming at them like, I don't want to fucking die. I'm terrified. This is it, man. Like, I'm going to know. There might be nothing. There might be this amazing thing. I don't fucking know. And so I started to find, I won't say I'm on a spiritual journey, but I just want to find peace. And that is what I think is like, when we get into our older age, if you're still struggling with, I don't know if there are other ways to say it, but like if you're still struggling with your career and family things and self things, like fine, that's all going to be there. But like really, when you get to 40, I mean, it's pretty much middle age, is like, what do you want to do with the rest of this time? And are you okay with knowing that, guess what? Like the countdown is now a real thing, where it's like when you're 20, man, it seems like 1,000 years from now. And then go 20 years more and you're like, okay, it's not like around the corner, but I'm halfway around the building, you know what I mean? And so I don't know. Long story long, but I've been really trying to find a new, like back to your idea of the perspective. I just want to be able to be at the end and look at the people around me and just be like, I'm okay. Like, I'm ready to go. You know what I mean? And not just be like, give me the fucking morphine. Kill me now. Like, and just take me out. I can't deal with it. But I know religion's never going to be an option for me. I'm too much of a logicalist. There's too many holes in it. Not to say that I understand the utility of religion. I get it, but it just doesn't ever sit with me.
Well, I mean, I think it's funny because I've almost gone in a slightly different route than you, a different path where, I wouldn't say like I was raised with religion, but they're like, it's always been a peripheral thing. Like my parents tried doing religion for a little bit, different ones, even when I was growing up.
Right.
And then, my aunt's been Catholic her whole life.
Yeah.
The only one in our family really that's been that way. And
dude, Catholic's a tough one, man. Militant.
It's a thing to me though, where in the last few years, like there's been a little bit of a strain from, I would say my perspective, from me to my parents. And it's mainly because they found a religion, which is fine.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say they're trying to recruit me, but it's like, well, it's the thing that's going to save us. And,
right.
Like I remember when having a conversation with my dad and, he was telling me basically his, no pun intended, but like the come to Jesus moment.
Sure.
Was literally watching YouTube videos, and his YouTube suggested videos are typically covers, people playing instruments, music videos, and then it's like something about Jesus.
Right.
And I kind of want to be like, people can pay to kind of promote something.
Put those ads in there.
Like put those videos if you live in a certain area or whatever.
Yeah.
And, the big thing I took away when he was having the conversation with me was just like, I want to be reunited with your brother. And I was like, all right, that's the core of this is 36 years later, you still haven't, or I guess 34, because he was 2 years younger than me. But 34 years later, you still haven't grieved. You haven't processed the thing, this traumatic experience.
Right.
And so now, very much like I've always felt,
brain reaches out to try to,
and I think,
put it together.
the thing that, from my perspective of a lot of things, like having friends who have been addicts in various, substances or whatever, that, the one thing that a lot of people teach is when you go to recovery is, religion basically is also hand in hand with it.
Yeah.
And you're essentially trading one addiction now for another one, but this one's deemed more accepting because it's more positive. It's for the betterment of you and your soul and all these other things.
Right.
And I feel like that's what religion to me is. As I've gotten older, is it's not. It's good in theory if it gives you hope or gives you something. If you don't have any, if you don't have that thing in you to go, it's not going to be all shit or whatever. Like to find your own meaning.
That's what I mean when I say I like the utility. Of like that's what I mean. It's like it's not a bad thing.
No,
lots of bad things have been done in the name of religion, but the utility, the core good of the utility of religion is a great thing. Yeah.
But unfortunately, I feel like the way I've seen it implemented by a lot of people is more. It's just a blanket Band-Aid to like,
exactly.
And even thinking about it beyond that, it's like, okay, very much to your point, we're at a point in our lives where, I mean, shit, if this is like even 200 years ago, we're pretty much dead.
Oh, yeah.
We're elder statesmen.
Yeah, we would be elder statesmen. Yeah. Which is a crazy thing. And not like 500 years ago. We're talking like 200 years ago. Yeah. We would be old men, 40 years old, man. And
so when I had been thinking a lot about life through the perspective of, our culture here in America is to don't hang on to things. Don't keep a legacy alive of anything. Destroy it, rebuild it in the new image of whatever is going to be the hot new thing.
Right.
And so it's the concept of religion to me when I think about it is I can break it down even further into, monogamy the more I think about it. I don't think marriage and monogamy are really meant to endure as long as we have. I think it speaks to the character of everyone that's able to maintain a 40, 50, 60-year marriage. Yeah. However, I see so many people shaming other people for like not sticking it out, or in my day we did this, and it's like, yeah, in your day you're telling me you'd rather sit there and be miserable for the rest of your fucking life? Yeah. That's what you would rather? Yeah. Just because you don't want to be embarrassed by going through a divorce? And then even now to like a different degree, speaking to monogamy, it's like, the whole point of marriage, till death do you part. Okay, well, if we're getting married at 13 and I'm only going to live to be 26, the rest of my life's not that long. Right. Exactly. So death do you part now, it's like you're someone with 65, 70 years and yeah. I mean, to kind of full circle it just in this conversation, I'm not the same person I was 5 years ago. No. So how do you expect, and this is where you're supposed to communicate and grow, and that's where the idea of marriage is a long-term thing. I get, but when I start deconstructing a lot of the societal norms and a lot of the things that people put in place to be the pillars of their life and give them comfort, I tear them down and go, why? Yeah. And I think the other thing that has allowed me to do that and find my own peace is very much like yourself, and I'm not going to say this because it puts your shit out there, and I don't want to do that. So I'll speak for myself only. My wife and I don't want kids. Yeah. And in the last couple of years, when a lot of people are like, gotta do better than the people before us, and you gotta like generational wealth now that we know that that's a thing, and all these kind of things, I see people, and I don't want to call it a rat race, but I see people living this life. I don't feel like they're living their lives. They're having to live the lives for the next person. Yeah. And even for our parents and so forth. And I'm like, fuck, that's so much stress that I don't want. No. And the more that I'm like, I don't want a kid. And now I don't have, and then to the point where other than living my life and being a good person and doing what I want to do or what my wife and I want to do, when that's it, when we're done, that's it. It's it. And it's like such a burden. Yeah. Taken off your shoulders. Yeah. And absolutely. It's one of those where I feel like the more, like I said, when I start deconstructing things that are supposed to be the things we want as people, as men, you want to reproduce. Right. And then adversely putting it into a different prism of looking at my dad. Okay, I don't want kids. So as soon as I'm gone, his legacy is gone.
Yeah.
Okay, now add to the fact of he's already had a child die.
Yeah.
And then now let's go one step further. He's getting closer to
Right.
his own mortality.
Yes.
So literally now, like, now I can understand why the idea of religion would come in. Well, it takes care of the son I don't have, and I'll be
Right.
reunited, and I'll live forever after this
You
life.
said the perfect thing. It's the Band-Aid effect where it's like there's no really good justification on what's going to happen to us. But when you put that, it makes every problem seem... Yeah,
well, it doesn't go away. It gives it a good...
Well, it gives it a almost like, well, for lack of a better phrase, like a fairy tale ending.
Yeah.
Where it's like, no, you didn't lose your brother. He's just gone right now.
Yeah.
And then when you die, you guys are going to like go skip off into the fucking sunset somewhere, wherever it goes. And I can't buy it. But again, I also am like, I don't like saying like, okay, so like, it's purpose the thing where when someone says, you know, like when a staunch atheist goes like, there's nothingness after this. I'm like, okay, then why do anything? Why do anything? Yeah. Like, then there's no real recourse. I mean, obviously, like, you're alive, you can do things, but there's no merit or loss. Like, why aren't you robbing people? Why aren't you know what I mean? You can do anything you want. And again, I'm not saying that atheism, like, unrefetted morality, but it's like your moral compass, I guess, is not withstanding to any type of afterlife punishment. So you can do anything you want, because you don't believe that there's any recourse after you die. So, but I also, I started to hate that. I started to be like, oh, nothing happens after I die. I'm like, okay. And then someone's like, well, I think it's heaven. Or like, well, I think it's reincarnation. I'm like, you guys, like, the only thing we can truly say is that there's a handful of realities that we see every day, and then it really is just we don't know. Yeah. You know, and I always say, like, my favorite thing, if you put it on my tombstone, the most ignorant thing a human being can say is, I know. Yeah. You know, like, you can say, I believe this, you can say, I have faith in this, you can say, I have even evidence that suggests this, but you don't know why. And again, back to that, like, 32 degrees Fahrenheit, it's like, we're observing the things that are happening in life, and I go like, but we really don't know why they're happening or how, or well, I guess maybe a little how, and so that's where my destabilization, I feel, is a little bit. And again, but it's weird because I'm not anxious about it, I'm not nervous about it. It's just,
as an inquisitive person, you want there to be something,
you know, and again, like the whole like poking holes in religion, like that was almost like a distraction where it's like, I know that's bullshit. But then I go to me and I go, okay, well, what's your bullshit? And I go, well, I don't have any. And they go like, well, sucks to be you, man. Where's your peace of mind? I go, I don't have a peace of mind. They go, well, you're going to die too. So when you get there, you're going to have some fucking shit to say. I'll be like, no, I'm going to fucking scream and freak out. So I've been just trying to find some semblance of a direction that I need to go. But I got nothing. I still don't have anything, you know. And my wife is so like cavalier about it too. She'll say to me, she's like, well, you'll know when you get there. I think
that's an age thing, though. I think that's a little bit of the age
she's
difference
33 and I'm 40, so it's like, I'm like, yeah, it didn't really hit me in my early 30s. Like my late 30s is when it started to like it's almost like just this started creeping in the back of my mind, being like, yeah, like you've never really believed in religion. It's like, oh, so what do you got? I'm like, I don't know. And they go like, well, it's your dad's getting older. He's into, how are you going to deal with that? Because the way you're thinking about it, when he's dead, that's it, man. He's gone. You're never going to see your father's face again. And I'm like, whew, wow, that seems scary. But again, exactly what you're talking about. Your father and a lot of people will use religion as this kind of like pull you out of the sinkhole, you know? It's like, no, you're going to see him. And it's like, but we don't know that. And
like what's weird with that even is like, because again, like, sort of going back to like my hang up with therapy of like thinking things, you know, because the house I kind of was raised up in is more of like you better have a good comeback or be able to keep something
intellectual
going.
Jousting. Yeah.
And so like to the point where when it kind of came to like getting the vaccine, that was an issue.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying like my parents are anti-vaxxers, but with this one, there's a little bit of trepidation, and I get it, but there's a lot of misinformation around there. Like
totally.
And, you know, like one of his things is like, well, we don't know what's in it. And it's like my wife literally works for a company where they made one of the three, and she's like, we know exactly what's in it.
Right.
And things like that. But it was like one of those things where, like, speaking back to my aunt, I called her because I was like, you're a nurse. You work in the medical field. You're also the only religious person I know that's grown up in a religion your whole fucking life.
Right.
Was there any inner struggle between those two things, your profession and your personal beliefs, to not do this? And she was like, no, absolutely not. And I go, okay. And like, that's now a little like extra like thing in my holster of things when I go to have this conversation with my dad, where I'm like, okay, blah 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 blah. Here's my counter argument to you, and you can't negate it because these are facts.
Yeah.
And that was something that I've learned to deal with too, is presenting facts. Things you not leading with I think, I believe.
Right.
And it's so weird that therapy, when you're going through it, teaches you to deal in actualities.
Yeah, and absolutes.
Absolutes.
Yeah, absolutes, yeah.
And it's like when you start using that with religion, you're like, you can't, like, yes or no. Did this happen? Well, I don't know. Well, then, okay, now let's tackle it from that perspective. And, like, you know, something that in some of my conversations that I've been thinking a lot about over the last, like, probably 2-3 weeks is the sentence my dad had asked me. And a lot of times, like, a couple months before that, my dad always is good for one thing I'll latch onto and just really think about.
Right.
So before that, it was, you know, I was watching one of your episodes or something like that, and I saw, like, you know, it had a couple thousand views on YouTube. And then I was like, holy shit, like, thousands of people are listening to this conversation my kid's having.
Yeah.
And then he was like, do you ever think about that? What are you going to do with your platform? And I was like, I don't have a fucking platform.
Right.
And to me, it doesn't feel like a platform.
Right.
And so then for a while, I sat on that for a little bit. I was like, okay, maybe instead of hammering, you know, and making fun of Scott Stapp for not coming on the show because he's sober and he doesn't want to come on anything that could, in theory, jeopardize his sobriety.
Sure.
I was like, maybe I need to be a little bit bigger of a person and maybe go, you know what, maybe there are people who are struggling with this, and having famous people on who they will value their opinion a little bit more than like you or I.
Right.
Maybe I should do the opposite and give them a platform to talk about, yeah, man, I used to party all the time. Here's a fun story. But then there was this moment, and here's the turning point for me. And then I turned my life around. And now I have all these other things. Instead of throwing all my money away or having, like, almost dying.
Right.
Now I have a marriage. I have a family. I have a successful career. I have all these things that I need to show the other side of that.
Yep.
And so that was something I really latched onto for a couple of months and put it into this. The other thing that I've been thinking about that he said was, he was like, you know, don't you want to be reunited with your brother? And I thought about it.
That's such an arbitrary question. That's like being like, you know, it's like, well, do you want to have the ice cream? You go like, well, yeah. It's like, oh, but I'm diabetic, so I shouldn't. You know, it's like this arbitrary, like, do you want to be like, fuck yeah, I want to see him? But
it's funny though, because you know, one thing I keep coming back to, and I've applied it to friendships, I've applied it to a lot of different things, where it's like, okay, let's really break that down. Like I said, my brother died when I was 2. He was only 3 or 4 months old.
Mm-hmm.
I have no memories of this person.
Right.
The person didn't grow to be anything other than a baby.
Right.
So let's presume that in your idea of heaven, this person has grown all along.
Right.
I'm going to meet
a stranger.
A stranger who I know nothing about.
Yeah. It's the same when they say, like, you're going to reunite with all your family. Like, oh, I've never met my great-grandfather, my great-great-grandmother, grandma. I was like, what am I going to say to them? And they go, hey, Christopher. And they're like, oh, I don't know you, dude. Like, or they're like, oh, but when you go there, all of their memories. I'm like, oh, no.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
I really don't think it's going to happen.
So there's things like that, like where, again, like you start breaking things down, and then I go,
it's wishful thinking.
It's no different than if I were to have gone to middle school with someone, and thanks to yearbooks and stuff like that, we can go back and be like, oh, man, this person was like my best friend.
Right.
I haven't seen them in 32 years.
Yep.
I don't know what's going on with them, and they're probably
not the same person, yeah.
Like, we have ways and tools to reach out to each other, and I've done that. Like, I've reached out to an old high school or an old elementary, middle, like one of my first best friends.
Yeah.
Reached out to him on Facebook. I was like, hey, just, you know, because you didn't have a photo, just, is this you?
Yeah.
And he's like, yep, it's me. And then I wrote a whole thing of like, hey man, like I'm so and so and da da da, like kind of laid it out there, and all I got back was like from like paragraphs of stuff, just to make sure like he knew who it was if he could remember. He's like, yeah, it's me, and I was like, cool, never mind, fuck it then. I don't care.
Right.
But I feel like that's the thing, and what's so interestingly enough, yesterday we started to watch the last season of Atypical, which is on Netflix. Do you know anything about that show?
I haven't watched it.
Okay, so it's real funny. Speaking of dichotomy of people, so it centers around this character, and he is on the spectrum. I think he's autistic, but he's like smart with a lot of other stuff, all this, you know, and then in real life he actually fronts like death metal bands and shit.
Okay.
It's really interesting, like just cross section of things. But in it, so in the last season, the character got in trouble for missing an assignment in college. It's like freshman year of college, and so and the teacher, who is Darlene from Roseanne.
Oh, I can't remember
Sarah
the actress
Gilbert.
name. Yeah, there it is. There it is.
And so she made him interview people and ask a bunch of questions. And in it, though, he has to ask them, what are they a master at? And it made me think about how we often tell ourselves we can't be a master at anything.
Right.
What's the old saying? Jack of all trades, master of none.
Right.
And how it's like, I've been thinking, is that a generational phrase that we're getting away from because we realize that you can't be perfect at things, and setting more realistic expectations for ourselves, for our better own mental health and physical well-being? Or is it just something where we've gotten lazy and the pursuit of perfection or mastering something isn't something we're passionate about anymore like we used to be? Yeah.
God, that's a huge
And that's why I had to write it down when I was thinking of it yesterday, because I was like, oh, I'm sure we're going to somehow find a way to get to something that's close to that.
It's one of those things that, I always think like whatever craft you've put yourself into, if it's a historical or a long-term craft, like, tattooing, stuff like that, you're never going to be, or rather you should never claim that you are anywhere near in the capacity.
You're not an ink master?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I would say this is that I would tell people, like, when people say like, oh, are you a tattoo artist? I go like, I try to be. That's always my answer. It's like, I was like, my wife always goes, ugh. It's like, oh, you kind of sound elitist when you say. They go, no. And like, elitist would be like, yeah, I am. It's all like, look me up. You know what I mean? Like, that'd be elitist. What I'm saying to them, it's like, I'm trying. Like, I'm really trying to be. Like, now, do I think that, I'm not an adept, like, or proficient in my craft? Oh, absolutely. I know I am. I'm very proficient. But I would never use the word master. But to your question, I think you and me are the last generation of where we are uninhibited. We remember a time with no internet. So we were at time where there was a whole part of our childhood, all up into our teens, where we were uninhibited by multiple freaking flashes of distractions and like, you should do this, you should do that. Like, it's the saddest thing, because we have more information available to us than any time ever in human history. And we have this younger generation that is the most uninspired, the most unambitious, the most unpassionate generation I've ever seen in my life. I have these 19, 18-year-old kids, and they're like, what do you want to do? I don't know. Well, what are you interested in? I like to go to Facebook and scroll. I kind of like video games. And I'm like, all right, cool. Any of the video games name? No. Well, what do you want to do with your... And I know it's brutal because I feel there is an unfair pressure that... because you remember when we were kids, like, SATs are coming up, ACTs are coming up. It's only the rest of your life, motherfucker. And you're like, oh, God. Like, you're like, what do you want? You're 17. What do you want to do with your life? And you're like, holy shit, take it easy. But at least at that time, there wasn't this bombardment of like YouTube videos and online things that just showed these people doing these grand lives, these grand things, and it makes you feel like shit sometimes about yourself. You're like, I'm never going to do that, I'm never going to be that, so what's the point? So again, rolling back to your question, I do believe that I think there are people who are masters of something, but they would never say it either. I think they're the ones that they just do and they keep doing, and then people just start to be like, look what this person is doing. And I've always noticed the toughest guy in the room is the most passive, the most humble. The smartest guy in the room doesn't exert his intelligence or tell somebody they're stupid or why they're wrong. And it tends to be the person that's the master of their craft just puts their head down even further and buries himself in their work, because that's what makes them truly satisfied. That cup gets filled by not the validation of everyone around them, by their own unique satisfaction that they're doing it, But again, I do the same thing. Like I tell people all the time, like I don't go to conventions to make money or to do this or whatever. I go there to get inspired. I like watching, other tattooers and stuff like that blow me out of the water. I love it because it makes me go, okay, I'm like, you can usually put yourself in a tier and you kind of know where you stand a little bit. Your personal tier, not like a real tier, but your own personal tier. And you can look at someone and go, They're better than me. Why are they better than me? And not in a competitive way. I just want to see. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, so it's just one of those things, you know? His dog is being a pain in the ass. He's a puppy. She's a puppy? He's a puppy? I don't know. Could be a boy or a girl. It's a good dog. It's just making him run around.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
it's funny, again, thinking of something else that has paralleled, since of this really terrible segue into something that wasn't as deep or profound, but,
No, sorry.
I was walking her and ended up having to, pick up her dog shit, and I was like, I bet this is something Chris probably wouldn't have thought he would be doing. At a certain
Dude.
point is just picking up dog shit and then somehow still, even being...
I called my wife out on that shit. I said, this is you, because my wife and I don't want children either, but I said, this is you needing babies. This is it. This is your maternity kicking in. You're 33. Your fucking uterus is screaming at your ovaries let's make it happen. And it's but then you knew that wasn't what you wanted, so then you get a dog. And literally, dude, she snuggles that dog every night. And, yeah. And don't get me wrong, she's been really good on her... end of the responsibilities of cleaning up dog shit, but I still end up feeding the dog every morning and taking him for walks and scooping up shit
a
too,
kid,
but
it's a joint thing.
it's a joint thing, yeah.
I mean, I don't really... It's funny, I feel like sometimes you and I, in the pain train sessions that you'll give me, and it's just the two of us in your studio, and we're talking about our life experiences and some of the things because, I've been with Bridget since, you've known me, basically. I think there's maybe a couple years before.
Yeah.
But most of our time of knowing each other, I've always been with her.
Sure.
And you knew the guys she dated before me.
Yep.
And so it's kind of an interesting, weird relationship we have with with each other.
Yeah.
And, in the last, couple of years now, because, you've been married, you've been with Kristen for a couple of years, we've been able to explore a different part of our friendship, which is now talking about marriage.
Right.
And talking about that side of things. And I think, you're one of the few people that when I've talked about things, you and I are very similar, where it's almost like the no ma'am club or whatever, where it's we'll have our grievances where it's Bridget squeezes the toothpaste just from the fucking middle, and I hate it. Just grab it from the end, because then there gets to a point where you've squeezed
Right.
it so much you can't fucking work it like that. And then
Right.
you're
Kristen won't shut any doors. She'll go into the kitchen and she'll pull things out, and she just leaves the door ajar. I'm just close it. And she's like, what? And
yeah. So I mean, there are annoyances that we have that it's just why do you do this? And it's anybody. I mean, friends
it's
and all that
people.
kind of... Yeah.
I always say it to them, just remove the husband, wife, or boyfriend, girlfriend. It's people. I always say, I could replace you with anybody. And if you did this shit, I'd still be dude, what are you doing?
But I think the thing that's always been interesting in us, airing our grievances of sorts, our Festivus for only ourselves of being married and some of the things, is that we always also take ownership of our own shit.
Dude, that is straight up. I said this to a young person, and I said, do you want to know what really makes, not only, I mean, there's the usual components of a successful relationship, but I said, the greatest thing that you can do that makes you a better partner and makes you grow, know your shit, know your faults, know what you bring to the table in I don't say a negative way, but something that's is gonna annoy the fuck out of most people. And if you can mitigate that and make it so you're aware and you try to solve. My favorite thing is I was very much where, and I still am, but I've gotten better at it. But I'm sometimes where if I say something to somebody, I expect them to understand what the hell I just said. And then if they keep doing it and then I repeat it all in the same conversation, by the third time I'm what the fuck am I not saying to you that you're not getting this? And it's not good, because then my frustration gets the better of me, and then that person feels attacked, so then they feel on the defense. So, and my wife is very A-type personality, and she'll give it right back to me. So I found a way where I just will stop and I go, what did you just take from that? You know what I mean? Right. And then they'll just do the whole oh, okay, I see. You mean this and this and this. I go, yes. Or if they say, well, this is what you meant. I go, no, that's not what I meant. This is how I said it. And so I found a way to just kind of take a breath for a second and go, okay, I just said that. What did you get from that? Or when they want to bait you sometimes, or it's they're oh, so what did you mean by that? Sometimes I just want to say exactly what I meant. I go, oh, fucking meant that you're a slob. It's like, but you don't want to say they're a slob. You just go, I think sometimes that you get into your own, other thoughts are on the table, and then little things that you could take care of in that moment, you throw to the wayside. And I always called it pieces of keist. Like, that's my wife's, maiden name. And so she would do this thing, and she doesn't do it much anymore. It's great. But she would literally come home. She would throw her jacket on the kitchen table. Yup, exactly. And then throw her keys here, and then throw her shoes down there, and then take her top off. And I'm just like, Kristen, and so what I did is I built her a closet down in the basement, and which is where it was before, but I built it out in this big basement. I said, okay, little rule. And she hates when I talk to her like this. She's like, you're fucking dadding me. I'm like, I'm not dadding you. I'm trying to create a reasonable thing here for us. Yeah. And so I'm like, that closet, you can have as messy, thrown around, things can be on the floor. That's your room. You can do whatever you want with that. But you need to take all that stuff that you put out in the commonwealth of our house in that room, as much you can possibly help. I know you're not going to be perfect on it. I go, but try. And she's been great about it. She really has. And that it took a little trying and reminding. But yeah, and then the same thing with her is that I actually used to use the word retarded all the time. And but I never meant it in like that type of connotation. But I would say oh, that's fucking retarded. And she was like, stop saying that. I do not like that word. And so I stopped. I really don't. And actually, because I'm around her so much, it just kind of like got slipped out of my vernacular. I just don't say it anymore. It's funny, the other day. And it's weird when people say it now, because I hear my wife in my fucking head be like when someone's like, oh, it's retarded, I go, don't say that around my wife. Don't. She doesn't like that.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, even to that, like, it reminds me of like growing up around my grandmother.
Yeah.
She was one of the first proponents that I had ever seen growing up as a kid, where you don't address people by gender. Like when we go to a restaurant, and it'd be her and my mom, really and my dad and I.
Yeah.
And, server just had a habit of be like, how are you guys doing? She goes, well, I don't know about the guys, but us ladies. And like there'd be times where people just wouldn't pick up on it. And so it's always, when I became a server, I always address people, how are you all doing?
Yep.
Or, if I'm addressing someone by...
Hi, y'all.
Or individually or whatever. Yeah. But it's funny because running into a mutual friend the other day at a gas station and said retarded, and I was like, oh god. And like I think I even felt like I flinched because I was not used to hearing it in everyday vocabulary anymore. Sort of like, oh, that's gay.
Exactly. I was just gonna say
I don't hear that anymore.
Yeah.
And it's,
or even like fag, you know what I mean? Like that was a big one too back when we were like,
It's funny because having just done an 18 Visions episode on discography discussion, and having talked about James and I doing an interview a couple years ago where he was like, oh, because we were talking about the legacy, or I was more talking about the legacy of the band and how integral they were in early metalcore, and even with them being so fashion forward leaning that they influenced a lot of like the emo screamo bands.
Sure.
But never really got their just due. And I was like, there's, James on record telling me, he was like, because I asked him what it was like going to the East Coast for the first time, and essentially, East Coast had its own hardcore scene, going on, and the West Coast had their thing, and they're, whatever. Like, what was it like the first time going over? And he goes, oh, it was weird because, I would go over there, and because we had guy liner and wore like nice clothes, everyone called us fags. And he goes, but then we go back the next time, and everyone starts looking like us. And then so it was like one of those, like I've told that story quite a bit, and it's like, okay, so the retelling of what he was telling me has kind of brought that word back a couple of times recently, and I'm just kind of like, yeah, that sucks. And it's interesting that like I don't think it's hard to grow as a person and grow with the times a little bit. Like, when like, it's so hard, and I'm like, yeah, like my mind definitely. I think one of my best friends put it the best, because like I sent him something and I was like, why does my mind just go to like sometimes these like gallows-esque humor things so quickly as like my default? And he goes, because we try to find and squeeze something funny out of everything. Yeah. Because
that was just the way we were.
Because we didn't have the internet. We didn't have all these things. So you just had to try to create something that you all could pull from.
Exactly.
Which is funny because like I was just telling someone the other day, I was like, because I'm not on Twitch yet, I still want to figure it out, but I'm just tech stupid. And but I've been interacting with a lot of different people that I know that are doing it.
Yeah.
And it's funny because like I feel like, because you have to react to something that's happening right then.
Right.
So like to hurry up and type up a joke, like as soon as it comes to you, and okay, here's how I need to like get it. And like a lot of people have been like, man, like these jokes are like, this joke's really fucking funny, or this, that, or the other.
It's a weird time that we live in, man, where, I mean, I even said this now, like, you know, I'm still unapologetically who I am, but I've even done this where, you know, my favorite thing, like when a woman would walk in, you know, I would say, hey gal, how are you? And I started to be like, where if it was especially like a new client, I would just be like, if I said like, you know, like, hey gal, like, or like, oh, good job, gal, you did a good session, I'll stop and I go like, hey, is that cool? Like if I say that, I'm like, if you don't want me, I'll just call you by your name. And, you know, most of them are like, you know, that's fine. It's like, but it's weird that we live in a time now where dialogue is very particular, and you actually and not even so much particular, but that you want to make sure that how you're delivering that you're not inadvertently like off-putting someone, you know?
The weird thing about that, and not to cut you off, but the weird thing about that is, think about this though, our actual day-to-day talking, conversating with people is at such a minimum that I feel like now you have to be more cognizant of what you're saying, because your interactions with people in person are so finite, especially after this last 16 months.
Oh, for sure.
And most of your interactions are over a computer or a device where your tone is completely lost. So it's like, it's funny. Like, I've been wondering if that's been where a lot of the breakdown is happening, and a lot of the vernacular where people are just like creating safe spaces, and people who aren't used to having to articulate themselves in a very like concise way are the ones that are having the problems, because they're like, oh, I can just be like, oh, you know, you're gay. Yeah. And it's like, am I? Why?
What? Yeah.
Like, and then you start like, and then as you get older, you're just like, why was that a thing we said? Like, because it, as you were saying, I don't mean it the way that like the actual word is intended.
Right.
So how did it ever get the connotation into that in the first place? Which, as a person who loves language and word, I think sometimes before I go to bed, and this is why I would always have problems sleeping, because I would just like think about a word, like shit.
Yeah.
I love thinking about like that, where it's like, who used it?
Right.
Who was the first person to be like, ah, shit? Right. And then like, can you imagine like the first person's like, what's that? And like, oh, well, like, something bad happened. Shit.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Right.
I mean, stepping shit.
Right. Or how like a one word can be a multivariate use. You know what I mean? It's like you can say fuck as in like a ow, or you can say fuck. Yeah, exactly. Like you that word you can use in so many different lights. Yeah, I probably one of my, I mean, obviously my favorite word is fuck, but like I really, really enjoy the idea of, you know, words don't necessarily have to be, God, I'm going to say this wrong, but intention of words is really what I find to be, you know, the most productive, is that your intention. Now, that doesn't like absolve or excuse anybody for using a word out of character, I guess. Out of turn, right? But like when I see an old man, you know, and again, I'm not excusing it, but when I see an old man and they're just saying like, oh, that guy Jewed me, you know, I'm like, that is very much the word where I'm like, okay, we don't say that anymore, you know. But I'm also like, pick your battles on that, because the dude's fucking 80. He's not. You're not going to change the way he does it. So it's like I always say, it's like and again, our generation is like yours. My generation is great because we're almost the bridge in between it all. We're old enough to know when we use those words, and then the woke culture of like the young 19-year-olds are like, no, we don't talk like that. No, I'm sure there's some that are like, fuck it, I don't care. But for the most part, I just say this, like, I just have never, like, being a person that was bullied when I was younger, I just didn't want to make people feel uncomfortable as much as I possibly can. Now, here's the thing. I tell people this right before any new client, right when I sit them down, I said, like, yeah, so what do you do in this and that? And they'll tell me about their jobs. And I go, like, P.S., just so you know, I say a lot of fucked up things. And I don't mean, like, fucked up words, but I'll make lewd jokes, like I swear a lot. So at any point, if you're ever uncomfortable with anything I'm saying, don't feel like you have to be quiet. Just say, hey, I don't really want to talk about this, or I didn't like that. Be like, okay, yeah, no worries. Like, I'm very easy at just making you feel as comfortable as you want to be, because that's really what I care about, is making you feel comfortable. Unless we literally are having a engaging conversation where I'm like, okay, well, now I don't care about your feelings, and I'm just going to tell you exactly what I think about what you're talking about right now, you know?
Well, even to that, do you feel like your profession has kind of helped you grow as a person as far as dealing with people? I mean, we talked about how like you're essentially a cut rate therapist and a little bit of a in customer service, but
Yeah.
I think even, you know, as you and I have been talking during this, thinking about, I don't want to say you have to tailor you to the client, but I definitely feel like because what you do brings in all types of different people.
Oh, all different walks of life for sure. Yeah.
I feel like you more than anybody else would probably have more insight into how things have been changing. Like you can see the old and the new.
100%. And it's crazy because, you know, when I mean every walk of life, I mean, I have trans clients, male, female, gay, straight, old, young. I mean, every walk of life you can possibly think of. But the one thing, you know, that I think that I'm very proud of myself is that with all this stuff with like many women coming forward about male tattooers and all this inappropriateness, I am so happy that I've conducted myself, you know, in a professional manner. And like I said, I make really lewd jokes, like I'll say inappropriate things, but never at the expense of the person I'm talking to, or never physical, none of that type of stuff. And I've very much a point. And I also check in with said person, especially if I get that vibe from them that they're maybe more sensitive, or like they have kind of like a different like outlook. I just say like, hey, like I had a great session with you today. It's like, was there anything that bothered you? And they go, no, great. And when all that stuff happened, there was actually this thing that started to trend on Instagram where people would put up, I felt safe by these tattooers. Dude, I got tagged in like 150 people's different stories. And I wanted to put them all up, but I couldn't. And I just put up a story. I was like, oh, to all the people that felt safe with me. That makes me, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, and I'm not doing that to be like, haha, Chris, you're a white knight. Like, no, I'm like, I just conducted myself like a fucking human being. And when I felt that, you know, maybe I did say something that I was like, oh, I always checked in and be like, oh, listen, like, was that too much or not? And like I said, no one's been like, no, it's fine. Like, okay, cool. Just making sure, like, let me know, like, all this, like, because the worst thing is when someone I call barrel rolling, where they just start fucking talking, and then they're just like, ha, 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 and then that person, and they look visibly, like, kind of shaken. They go, all right, see you next time, and the person walks out. I'm like, you don't even know how that person felt about all that shit you just said. Like, don't check in with them a little bit. So I gotta say, after all that stuff, like, that is something I'm very proud of. And back to, you know, your original question, or is like, you know, that perspective that I've gotten from the younger generation, and then even people our generation, and now the old generation, I can kind of take the values from all of them, but also, you know, ingratiate, is that the word?
It is a word.
Yeah, ingratiate myself into the now and take those good values, but then also kind of push out the ones I'm like, this isn't viable anymore. You know what I mean? Like, you can't say that. And yeah, but the only thing I have a problem with, I think, with all this is the, you know, people really digging up people's shit from like, I mean, I don't have any, but like, I mean, I'll fucking dare anybody look at any of my stuff. I will say anything.
You're also the most private person.
Dude, I'm the most private person ever.
I mean, I recanted a part of a story I was going to tell that was a mutual thing that even after, like, I said it, I was like, well, even me going like, well, I'm not going to speak for you. I basically just did, but I didn't put like the thing I was going to say about you personally out there, because I'm like, I know that's not you, so I'm not going to.
Yeah, I've never put anything out in the ether that I wouldn't say, yeah, I said that. Or if you need me to explain more on why I said it, I'll do that. I'll do that. But, you know, I've never done anything or put anything out. But like when you have, you know, this cancel culture that's just like, you know, deep diving on people's Twitter like 10 years ago, I'm like, God damn, I'm so happy I didn't get into that shit, you know, because here's the thing. There are probably some radical things I said in my 20s. Nothing like, you know, horrifically charged, but the way I thought about religion, or the way that I thought about, you know, I mean, I was a hyper liberal, and so I was very, very critical of people. And it's just, and I'm glad that stuff isn't out on the internet and all that stuff to see, because I'm sure I'd look back at that, even if it wasn't horrific for someone to read, I'd be like, geez, Chris, what the fuck are you saying, man? Like, you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's sometimes Time Hop will pop up, and even I've deleted some, not cause, like, the weird thing is I deleted like a fucking lyric from a song, like literally a rap song.
Really? Oh,
like,
okay.
Quoted a rap song, literally, and like it was even like, it's this lyric from this song, thank you, from this artist, and this is, and then either an explanation of like why I'm feeling that lyric, or maybe sometimes that lyric in and of itself,
right?
All I fucking need. Like,
right.
I just saw like yesterday's Time Hop was an Every Time I Die lyric, and it was Pete Wentz on the bonus track off of New Junk Aesthetic, and it's not like, or it's women not lack of ambition that keeps good men bedridden.
Yeah.
And so I posted that because I just like the song. I just like the lyric. It's an interesting lyric.
Some note, and this is something I've actually always wanted to ask you, and I ask it a lot of people, is that when you're singing a rap song and there's the N-words in it, do you ever say it out loud when you're singing it? I do too. Yeah. And I've actually done it in clubs with there's black people around me, and they've never been like, you can't say that. But it's weird, though, because people have done that in interviews, and they've ostracized them. And they go, he can't say them. I go, he's quoting. He's not saying the word he's not taking it out of context. He's literally verbally quoting what is happening in the song. Like, I don't know why that just bothers me sometimes.
And that's like a way bigger issue. I mean, because it's really funny. Like, so I'm not really on discography discussion much anymore, just because the schedules just don't really align.
Yeah.
We're probably going to address that here soonish, and that's why Dan's not really on the show anymore and hasn't been for a couple of months. Yeah. I mean, just life happens. We still talk every single fucking day.
This has also been such a solo project. Like, your passion of this has never been matched by anybody else's.
And it's not fair. I mean, it's like, when we merged and I was like, cool, like now you're on my thing and I'm on your thing.
Right,
but then it's like, there are times where we're both like, but like we'll secede to the other because it's like, well, I mean, that's your thing and I came onto it. So it's like, like we at least understand that about the dynamic. But
yeah,
no, it's funny. And like I said, so like when doing discography discussion and, we did Candiria.
Yeah.
Like, obviously anyone who knows me knows like I'm pretty big into rap, hip hop, R&B, stuff like that. Like, that's for as much as I love metal and am known as like the token metal dude.
Yeah.
I probably love that shit more.
Oh yeah.
Honestly,
I think that's probably like those two genres. I would take you on a trivia for that. Like, there's some underground hip hop that you talk to me about. I'm like, well, who the hell are you talking about?
Well, I mean, case in point, and then I'll circle back to finishing this one. So, like, about a month and a half ago, someone on Twitter was like, hey, man, like, I feel like you're really into, like, all kinds of different stuff. Like, what have you been listening to that's new? And I go, honestly, because, like, of having to do this sometimes, having to listen to a record or going back through and listening to a discography of someone I peripherally know.
Yeah.
I hate listening to music now because I'm like, it just feels like a chore. Like, I have to find my way through it.
Yeah.
I'd rather hear the stories. I'd rather hear, and that's why I've always loved the behind the scenes. That's why I always like reading the books that are like kind of behind you and all that kind of stuff. Or no, they're in my office. Never mind. But it's one of those like where I was like, I am more, since I grew up on music that wasn't of my generation, like through my parents' music and stuff, and being into pop music, which basically pop and hip hop borrow so heavily from other people that a lot of times I tend to go back. So like, I was telling someone, I was like, honestly, right now I'm in like a really weird rabbit hole of Jay Dilla over the last 3 years. Like, I knew who he was. I just didn't really understand like the importance of Jay Dilla. And like, so Record Store Days would come out and everyone would be like, oh my God, the new Jay Dilla or remastered Donuts, whatever.
What was the first rap lyric that blew your mind? Like, just a couple bars. Like, what was the one rap lyric that...
Honestly, it's...
Like, you were like, holy shit.
It wasn't even rap. It wasn't presented in rap as a rap song. It was Public Enemy and Anthrax. But my dad, so it was Bring the Noise.
Yeah.
But then it was the lyric, radio stations, I question their blackness. They call themselves black. We'll see if they play this.
Oh,
and that was on, like... But, like, that was even on, like...
that.
And still, goosebumps because of like how culturally significant that is.
Oh yeah.
Basically saying, you say you fuck with me and my music. Let's see if you'll play this where I'm saying some real shit.
Right. That was, what was mine was Wu-Tang's War and Peace. And honestly, there wasn't the content. The content you're talking about is like the other, I think, side of that. But mine was when you would see these kind of guys taking words and make and my favorite part is like, I bomb atomically Socrates' philosophies and hypotheses. You can't believe in that by dropping these mockeries. Lyrically performed armed robbery. I fucking heard that for the first time. I went, Yo, I was like, rewind that. Holy shit. Like, the way the cadence and all those words tied together, I couldn't. It blew my fucking mind.
And then I think that was on Triumph.
Yes, yeah.
Which is on Wu-Tang Forever.
Yeah.
War and Peace is Ice Cube.
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry. Yeah. That was the Triumph.
There goes my knowledge.
And then, see what I mean? Like, the dude knows more. But, yeah.
Yeah, and then even later in that, RZA with his line of talking about busting out like raw sex in your cerebral cortex.
What the fuck? Yeah, they were masters at just.
Well, it's like that's where the whole like Shaolin thing, like where you're better as a whole, not as an individual.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the other thing kind of that I loved about hip hop too is unlike a band, I feel like even though someone may become more successful, they always brought they
brought them with them.
This is a somewhat terrible reference, but it's like it's one of the last ones I really can think of where it's like Nelly got fucking huge. Yeah. Then he brought the St. Lunatics on all his shit. Then like Murph Lee got
Eminem with D12, you know,
yeah,
like he
and
brought
like
D12
but like
up.
D12 didn't like quite do the same thing like St. Lunatics did, where it's like okay, like here's the St. Lunatics record with Nelly on it and all that kind of stuff, and then like each one got a fucking solo record from there.
Oh, okay.
Wu-Tang is really one of the few that like it's extensively
was a group to start with, and then
has a group and put out one record together, and then put out like 37 fucking solos albums and shit like that, between all of them. But no, like I mean, and so that's kind of the weird thing is like, so with Dilla, I knew Dilla was important because he's here from Detroit. Yeah. So like I felt like as someone who loves hip hop, especially production, I love production stuff in general. So for me, I was like, okay, like obviously everyone talks about how important Dilla was and how we wouldn't have, these artists and these artists that say they were influenced by what he did or working with him and so forth. So I really needed to like go do my homework. And so it started with listening to this like I think there's 3 or 4 mixtapes of his where they're like 3.5 hours long. They're almost stream of conscious, like where it's like, here's a beat and then boom, it goes into another one. Then it goes into another one. Goes into another one. And so in doing that, you get a real sense of him. You get a sense of what he was doing. You can start seeing like, oh, this is like his style. This is what he does. This is how he finds like this sample. It's very lo-fi. It's very like lo-fi backpack rap kind of stuff. Yeah. Like sort of like Tribe Called Quest a little bit, like Dilated People, so some stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then, then once I kind of felt like I had a better understanding of him as a producer doing just beats and making beats and so forth, I then was like, okay, like let's see the stuff he's done with other people. So like Slum Village from Detroit, like they did a record with him, and then like they got somebody else, and then they ended up working with Kanye in like their third record, which then like I know Kanye is a disciple of Dilla being from Chicago, so real easy similarities there.
Right.
But then it's like early Kanye, you're like looking at Blueprint, like the Jay-Z record, the first one he really did, his first record, some of the other stuff he's working on. You're like, oh, this is where Kanye's like lo-fi sample heavy, but instead of like I feel like Dilla was more like laid back and chill. Kanye would speed it up and make it more of like more of that chopped and screwed kind of sound to it.
Sure.
And adding his own little influence to it, which now we're still seeing people 10 years later doing shit Kanye was doing on his second record that's still influential.
Who started that the mumble rap? Was that like Future?
So mumble rap. Okay, so here's the thing that I think in doing my...
So I always remember that's the first guy I heard here really do it was Future.
Like, I mean, technically you could almost say it's like Bushwick Bill from fucking... I can't think of them. Mine's always playing tricks on me. I can't...
Yeah.
Ghetto Boys.
There you go.
You could always say like Bushwick Bill from the Ghetto Boys kind of. Maybe it was like, a little bit because he just... I don't know. Like, I mean, he got shot in the face and shit like that.
Right.
So, I mean, it's like, I don't know. Like, was that part of why it happened? Like, whatever. And then you could even say, like, did it maybe start with Biz Markie a little bit?
Right.
Because his enunciation's kind of weird.
Yeah, kind of
like
slurred.
Slurred.
A little slurred, yeah.
But, like, I think, like, what's funny, like, I've been saying this a lot lately, is, like, when everyone's like, oh, I hate, like, this current rap. And I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of it. Bridget's gotten me into a lot more of it than because she's into it. And I think I've given her a healthy dose of, like, where shit came from.
Right.
Try to. And it's funny. I think I pinpointed the new era of, like, just hook-heavy rap back to 3 6 Mafia.
Oh, okay.
Because, I mean, like, you look at a song now, and it's like, what is the fucking song? I don't know. It's wet ass pussy,
Right,
and that's
right.
like,
It's more the beat than it is the content.
It's a beat and a hook ad nauseum, and it's like when you think back to 3 6 Mafia, that's all they fucking did. That's all Juicy J did.
Because when you hear like Nas,
slob on my knob, like corn on the cob, and then it's like, and it's like, it's very like, I don't want to say it's dumbed down rap, but it's like so on the fucking beat. It's not like Nas. Like
Nas is
like,
a content rapper. He's trying to say something.
You know, when they say there's not musicality to rap, is like, you know, one of my favorite points, other than the roots clearly, is to say, look at Nas, look at one mic. So what I love about that song, when you really break it down from a production and a song perspective, is so Nas on the verses gets really loud. Like the music and his cadence start getting more aggressive and louder, and then it comes back. All I need is one mic, and then it gets real quiet. Then when he gets to the bridge, it reverses. So it goes quiet, and then he gets louder. And it's crazy to see like just a little nuance like that. And it's like, oh, that's what to me separates the greats. Like when you're able to like just do weird shit like that. Like peripherally, you're like, even surface level, you look at it and you're like, oh, it's a great song. But like when you really just start listening to it over and over, or like you're saying, like where you're like hearing lyrics or a lyric you didn't hear, and you're like, oh fuck. Or maybe it hits you differently because that's,
like you said, like relevant, like socially relevant, and it was before its time almost, and that's
And so to me, like that's kind of the crazy thing. And then when you start getting into territories of East, West, you know, Southern, all this kind of stuff, even, you know, you look at something, as much as people don't say it's hip hop, but I think you look at a band like why am I blanking on their name? The I Think You're Freaky people. I can think it was Danger Mouse. That's not it. God, what is the name of that fucking band? It's such an like it. I mean, to me, it's annoying, but like, and as soon as I see it, I'm gonna be like, oh yeah, that Die Antwoord. Antwoord. But I mean, it's like what they're doing is like weird because it's like taking sort of rap through the like European kind of EDM scene sort of, and just flipping weird influences on itself, and you're just like, all right, like interesting, wouldn't have thought that. And it's like but it's not hip hop solely, it's an amalgamation of things. And kind of bringing it back to like when on discography discussion and talking about Candiria, it's like, you know, I love that Candiria can be a just fucking straight ahead mathcore band like Dillinger, like just weird jazzy shit, play legitimately jazz in the middle of a fucking record, and then Carly brings out other MCs and they have a legit hip hop song in the middle of this hardcore record. And it's like, to me, that's because they live in New York and they're bringing all the influences of New York out.
Which is the mecca for like influences for sure.
And so to me, like that's where when I get into music, like I feel like, because since I have a love of pop and hip hop and stuff, and it samples so much from something 20 years ago or whatever and finds a new way to reimagine it. That's why I think I like that more than traditional hardcore or metal or rock or whatever, because it's like, who's really doing anything that's really got you like interested? Like to me, like for as much as everyone shits on Post Malone, I'm like, at least the dude's doing interesting shit.
He's doing something different.
He like incorporates a lot of different styles. May not be into it. He's like kind of doing emo stuff. Same with Juice WRLD before he passed away.
Kind of a little like, country-ish.
And
like
there's like a set, like he did full-on country songs. On YouTube. And I was like, God damn, is there anything this motherfucker can't do? Like, and it's just his love of all music. And
you're absolutely right. I think that's the point even to make, is that he is a true musical appreciator that just actually became a musician. You know, you can see that it's almost like the same way like Kevin Smith. He was a total film nerd before he became a director. But you can see that. Quentin Tarantino, same thing. It's like they were completely lovers.
Different capacities,
Well, different levels, we'll say.
One loved language and the other loved film.
Right. Yeah. So But it's still like you can see they were nerds first before they were activists in their field, you know, and that's what I love about it. And you can see that with musicians too, where it's like they were the guys that were screaming the loudest in the crowd before they were even up on that stage, you know what I mean? And I think that's what Post Malone was, is that he just loved it so much and then was like, I have to do this.
Well, on top of that, he tried out for I forget what the band it was, but he tried out for a metalcore band playing guitar. And then they're like, and then a few years later, now he's became Post Malone. And it's like, you know, I talk all the time on this podcast about pivoting when something isn't like, if you're passionate about something, but maybe you find that the thing you're doing isn't working,
right,
you'll pivot.
Yep.
So like,
it's the same.
Yeah. So it's like
Ball field,
I love
but
music.
Different.
I tried doing
position.
the band thing. I still love playing guitar, but like I don't have that creative side to me to like write something because I listen to so much music that I go, oh, it sounds like this. It sounds like this. Sounds like this. And then now trying to find 3-4 other people to get with, coordinate schedules, try not to fight about dumb shit, and it's like, yeah, I did that. I did some shit tours like. Not fun. I don't want to do that. And then it's like, okay, well, I'll book shows because I got tired of people being like, there's no good bands. Fuck it, I'll bring them to you.
Right.
Then I got tired of the egos of dealing with like the business side of some of the shit and dealing with venue stuff and things like that. And it ruined going to shows for me because now all I can think about is like, oh, when does the ticket sell? What's the guarantee? Is there a back end deal? Like, oh, how much? Just I wonder if, like, is the venue getting a cut of the merch? Like, oh, how much are they selling shirts for? Oh, they're doing price matching. So that means the headliner, or like for those that don't know, headliners will go, you're welcome to sell this many shirts, but you have to match whatever we sell our shit for. You have to sell it at the exact same price, so you don't basically undercut us. And so, like, when you go to big, like, arena tours and so forth, if you notice, like, small local band that's on the bill has a T-shirt and they have, like, one, and it's, like, $45 too, it's because the headlining band was like, yeah, you're price matching us. And then, of course, what's going to happen? Well, I'm not going to buy...
whomever, this band I don't fucking know. Yeah, exactly. And they don't get the... Oh,
so there's, and then, like when merch, like I know the Intersection, I think their merch cut is 20-25%. They get 20-25% of whatever the merch sells.
What?
At the venue. Yep. Just for them having the space that they gave them.
That's fucked up. That's a lot.
And it's more at other places, I've learned.
Oh my God.
I think I've heard
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah. I've heard it goes up to like 30-35%. So, oh yeah, there's, and like, again, when you start learning about some of these things, you're just like, fuck, man, like, it just ruins shit for you.
Kind of takes the romanticism all out of that.
So then I, like, got out of that, started writing about stuff, because I'm like, all right, like, let me make people feel like they're at a show. And then I just got tired of being tagged the metal guy.
Right.
Even though it's like, okay, I covered Lil Wayne, I covered Whitney Houston, or not Whitney, Janet Jackson, I covered Bone Thugs, I covered, like, so much beyond what I'm known for.
Right.
And then I was like, well, fuck it, I'm going to do this thing. Yeah. And it's still funny because, like, I've tried parlaying this into other avenues and so forth because I like people.
Yeah.
But it's so funny to see that even, like, I ruin songs for Bridget all the time because, like, I was, like, there was a pop song, like, probably 4 years ago. I don't remember the song, and I know as soon as I say this, maybe it'll jog someone's memory, whoever's listening. But I was like, this melody sounds really familiar. Like, what the fuck? What is this? And I'm like, kind of trying to figure it out, but then, like, the actual song's going, so, like, it's kind of hard to, like, try to remember the original lyrics that are there.
Right.
And then I figured out, I'm like, this is, like, Fastball's third single that was not a single. Like, it flopped. It was a terrible fucking flop. They had The Way and whatever the other fucking single was. This is the third song, and it did not do well. Like, it basically broke the band's career. Right. And now they're using it in a fucking top 40 pop song.
Yeah.
I was like, holy shit, like, wow, the tides fucking have changed. And it's like, it's crazy to me being a fan of music, and that's why I love going back, because it's like, you never know how, like, something that was deemed a failure can now suddenly become part of a success. Look at, I mean, I'm not saying Trent Reznor or Nine Inch Nails is a failure, but
no.
Lil Nas X used a snippet of a Nine Inch Nails song that wasn't even a single, it was like a deep cut,
right?
And then Trent Reznor wins a country Grammy because of his involvement in it, and he could have squashed it.
Oh yeah,
if he wanted to, but he didn't.
Yeah.
And it's like now you get a part of a Grammy. And it's like that's the kind of shit that intrigues me about being a person.
Yeah.
That you can learn from.
I mean, think about Johnny Cash. Like took. I mean, like, dude. I mean, can you imagine that though? Can you imagine like whatever agents of his called up Trent Reznor and says like, hey, you know your song "Hurt" from the Downward Spiral? Yeah, Johnny Cash wants to sing that. Are you good with that? He probably couldn't have said yes fast enough because like that's one of those like. That's a legend calling up arguably another legend, but in another era, and saying like, I love that song. I would love to sing that. And literally one of my last record I'm ever going to cut out before I pass. It's like, is it, you're cool with that? I'm sure he was like, oh my God, fuck yeah, let's do that. But I think that's, well, I've actually asked this many times. I'm like, do you think that when, say like Aerosmith was writing Love in an Elevator, right? And they finished that song, and it was all mastered, and then they were all sitting there in the studio, and they played it back from start to finish. Do you think they were like, dudes, this is going to be played 40 years from now? Or are they like, good song, great, happy with the outcome, great? Like, I just don't know like what level they think. Then when they're like, you did not realize maybe at the time that you're writing an iconic song, but did you have an inkling, in the back of your head, like...
They did, and here's why. And this, again, this is why I love stories about people working. So that was when they were working with Desmond Child.
Oh, okay.
So Desmond Child, who, like, hearing him recently, because he had a book come out about a year or two ago, and so he did a whole bunch of podcast rounds, and just the fucking stories that dude tells. And he's like, he had a band, and he wasn't very successful himself. Like, they had a hit or whatever.
Yeah.
But he became a massive songwriter for like Kiss. He did like I Was Made for Loving You.
Oh wow.
I think he did Dude Looks Like a Lady.
Okay.
And fun story, like tidbit about that song, the way that song starts, they went to make a loop or whatever, but they couldn't fucking turn off the loop. So they're like like they didn't know how to turn it off. So that's why it's still there.
I actually just saw a YouTube video this morning where there's a thing where they needed like a maraca for some song. I can't remember which one it was. But so they had this like special microphone, and I guess they took a sugar packet and just went.
Sweet Emotion.
Yeah, Sweet Emotion. Yeah, that's a sugar packet doing that shit. Like I just watched. It was a Howard Stern interview, and I just was like, and Howard Stern's like, how did you guys like these mics? Like you can turn them up, or literally you can put it against your chest, and you can hear your blood, like gushing through your organs. And it's just like, whoa. So he's like, it was a sugar packet. I was going just back and forth.
But I mean, like,
shit blows my mind.
I know Desmond has talked about, especially working with Aerosmith, Bon Jovi, and countless others from the 80s, about how a lot of times it would start with a phrase. So, love in an elevator. All right. Let's
build on that. Yeah.
And I mean, like, even like one of my favorite videos to show everybody, just because like the like the holy shit moment, and he just had another one too, so it's like goddamn, Dave Grohl is like just a national treasure. But like there's a video of him talking to Kyle Gass from Tenacious D.
Oh shit.
And the video is like called like Writing the Hits or whatever, and then Dave's like breaks it down and he's like, I mean, everyone wants to be all like da da da, like write all this beautiful shit. And he goes, you just gotta write a fucking hit. You gotta treat it not like a bumper sticker. Life's a bitch, keep on trucking. And then he's like, and he goes, a lot of white people dance to like a fucking chorus or whatever, or a rhythmic things.
Yeah.
And he goes, you know who I learned how to write hits from is Aerosmith. Aerosmith writes the fucking hits. And he goes, but you know what they do? They will start off with the chorus. And he goes, love in an elevator. How does it start? Love in an elevator. Mm-hmm. Dude Looks Like a Lady. How's that start?
Yeah. Dude looks like a lady.
And then you just start going through Aerosmith songs and you're like,
holy shit, they all are just the chorus.
Oh my fucking God, they do.
They just build around the chorus. Wow.
And then
that's true. The hook. Yeah, they just build around the hooks.
And then so it was like one of those like where ever since then of thinking about like Foo Fighters stuff, it's like he's kind of done that in Foo Fighters as well. And then like very recently he has a multitude of like documentary things out, and he did one where he talks to different usually it's different artists, and because he's got one with his mom where he goes and talks to artists and their moms, and that's pretty interesting. But then he has another one where he goes and it's like, why do we do this? Something like that, like Get in the Van or something. I don't know I haven't seen it. But he's talking to Pharrell, and Pharrell is like a musician and plays a lot. Like that's the cool thing about NERD and the Neptunes and all that stuff, is that a lot of it's real instrumentation. And so he was like, oh, like, man, Nirvana back in the day, like he goes, I was like inspired by like the Commodores and like the OJs and all this kind of shit, like that Motown sound. He goes, I mean, like it's sprinkled all throughout fucking Nevermind. He goes, think about Smells Like Teen Spirit. And it's like,
oh yeah.
And it's like,
yeah.
And it's like, and then as soon as he like did the pattern, and then they played the Smells Like, but like when they showed Dave doing it like slow, like almost like halftime, like,
yeah.
And then Pharrell just goes, whoa, wow. And you're like, that's why it's really cool to me to be a fan of other shit, because then it's how do you bring that in and your influence into something and make it bigger than any of those pieces.
Right.
And I feel like, that's something that I feel like you have done with your tattooing. Like even, I was talking to did an interview with a band that just got signed from here to an Australian label, and I ended up finding out that the guy went to Kendall.
Oh.
And so I was like, oh, funny, like I knew that we were doing this soon, and I was like, so a buddy of mine went to Kendall, and I told him kind of our story from the first podcast where I was like, I'd asked like, I don't understand the point of art school, because basically you're studying art and you're studying all these people who set the benchmark for these, Pollock with this, or Rembrandt with these, or all these other different types of artists and so forth, and then they go, do this. And then you go to do something and they tell you why you failed at it, even though the whole point was, these people broke rules. They kept some of them, but they broke others, and that's how this became a movement or became a style or whatever. And he goes,
they always call it the rejection of whatever movement's happening at the time.
Yeah, I had a project and they were like, oh, well, you failed this because you didn't push the boundaries. So then everyone pushed the boundaries on the next one. Like, oh, but you pushed too far.
Yeah, you went too far.
And then he was like, well, what the fuck? Like, that's not what art is. And I was like, oh, did you feel stifled when you went to... He goes, yeah.
It's weird, too, because the difference from... Like, it's weird. The undergraduate program is when I really got, like, that type of push, where it was just like, you're not doing this right. You're not doing this. This isn't right. Like, it was like, you need to use this. You need to use Galkid. But after I got my bachelor's, when I went to master's school, it was like... It was just try this glazing technique. I love podcasts is that right or wrong. It was just like, you already have your shtick, so just build on that. You know what I mean? And anything you do is fine. And at that time, I was already tattooing like 4 years, so I had to make a big decision. That's why I only did a semester of master's school, where I just was like, do you want to... Because then they also start to groom you to be a professor, because most professional painting or two-dimensional painting artists, well, you're not going to live off that. It's just not possible. So they're kind of preparing you to speak. Because I remember in the second semester, it was like, well, you have to take a syllabus class. I'm like, what? And they go, yeah, it's like it'll get you so you can write your syllabus. And I go, what if I don't want to be a professor? And they basically looked at me like, oh, you're going to be a professor. Like, you're not. There's no way you're going to make a living off your painting.
There's nothing in there for you being a creative.
And I'll never forget, I mean, Patty Constantine, who was on my graduate committee, I'll never forget, like, what she said to me. And I actually wrote her an email, like, years after to say thank you, because I was like, hey, listen, like, I'm tattooing. And what I had done basically is at the end, I don't know if I said this in the first podcast or not, but they said at the end of the first semester of the painting class, the graduate painting class, to bring in all your artwork, everything you're doing, not just painting, like everything. And so I brought in my tattoo portfolio, and people were just like, running through that, and like I almost felt like my paintings were just collecting dust at the moment. They didn't want to look at my other stuff. They just want to look at my tattoos. And I remember at the end, I asked Patty, like, hey, Patty, can I talk to you for a second? She's like, yeah. And I said, so, the studio that I work at, the one other artist that was sharing a booth by, he's going to another studio, so I'm going to be there full time. I've been offered kind of that. I feel like I'm getting even busier now that I'm here in a bigger city. I love painting, and, I'm happy to do this. And I go, but what should I do? Like, I love academia and the prestige of fine art. I'm like, but tattooing is just screaming my name. And she said, she goes, Chris, I think you would make a great teacher. She goes, I think you're very eloquently spoken. Like you connect with people. It's like, and you're a fantastic painter. She goes, but did you see the reaction that you got from your tattoo? She goes, like, maybe the universe is telling you already. Pivoting. Thank you. Exactly right. I was just going to bring that back. Like, my pivot never was out of art. It was just, I was in the wrong path of art, of what art style. And so, yeah. And she just said, you're a fantastic painter, but your tattoos are incredible. I think that's what you should do. And she goes, and you know what she really did? She goes, and besides, she goes, I've been doing this at the time, I think 18 years. She goes, do you know how much money I make? And I'm not going to tell you the number, but I just went, you've put almost 2 decades in, and wow. And she goes, well, I get a discount on my supplies, so there's that. And I just was like, okay. So, and I was making more money than her. 4 years in tattooing, I was not even a little bit more than her, a lot more than her. And I went, okay, so it's not a very economically, feasible thing. But I just remember, like we were saying, that pivot, it was such a great way for me to look back and go, the world was already telling me what I needed to do, and I just turned a little bit, and I never looked back. And now, this next September or August will be 19 years I've been tattooing.
Do you ever think about the things? So, like, this sounds kind of gross to say it like this for me.
Yeah.
But I know you'll understand the question.
Sure.
So, don't make much money doing this.
Yeah.
But we, thanks to one of our sponsors, make money that pays bills, so it's basically a break even. And there was a time where like I was able to pay like through getting paid out every so often. Like it was like, cool, I paid for that for the year, paid for the website for a year, paid, for a graphics person for a little while, paid this. I had money left over and I was like, I'm going to give some to, at the time when Dan was still on, gave it to Dan. Dan goes, oh my God, thank you so much. I was able to pay my, like part of my mortgage with this. I paid like part of my car payment. Like if I didn't want to like pay things or buy things and reinvest basically.
Right.
Like Bridget at one point was like, you realize like if you get paid out every this much and this is what you make, like that's like, that could pay your car payment for like when you get paid out for like 3 months or whatever.
Right.
And I was like, holy fuck, this dumb thing I do
became lucrative. Yeah.
Not lucrative, but it's like it can pay for tangible things that like where it can, in theory, it's a break even, and then in some instances, if I budget better, like accordingly, it's like profitable. It can be a profit and it can help in other financial areas.
Yeah.
Have there been moments where you're just like, holy fuck, like this thing I do has got me
every
X,
day.
Y, or Z?
I'm not even joking. Well, I wouldn't say every day. I would say at least every month or at least once a week. I thank my lucky stars. So I always say, I'm like, I thank my lucky stars that I'm gonna. And I hate using the word, but it's a very privileged position, where it's like I pick and choose what I want to tattoo. I have a nice car, like I have a nice house, like I can pay for the things I want to do. I'm not rich, but within reason, I never have to worry about money. You know what I mean? I just don't. Like if I want something within reason, I can get it. I want it. But it's not like I'm buying Bentleys and fucking, live in a fucking like $500,000 or $1 million home. Like I don't live like that. It's like, but that's also maybe like the left brain or my mom always called me a left brain artist, where I was relatively good with money and quite cleanly and like, organized, where most of my artist friends are slobs and they're all over the place and like the absent-minded professor, if you will. And so I was kind of like good with that, but they would live outside their means. Now there was a time where I did, and that was when I first started tattooing in college. And I remember, and I'll never forget this, is when Austin was a piercer at Intricate Decor, and I just got out of my apprenticeship, and I remember we had a massive week. For some reason, it was when all the kids came back into school. They just got their like loan dumps, so like all these kids. So I remember I was now actually working full time at Intricate. And this was one of those where all the money went through the shop, and at the end of the week, Jason cut you your check, or usually it was cash. But it was one of those things where it's like I would keep my tips, so I had a little money. But anyways, at the end of the week, he cut me like fucking $1,400.
Holy shit!
Yeah, and that was like for a 22 or 23-year-old dude. I was just like, "This is mine." He goes, "Yep, that's after your." And that was when I was taking 50%. So that means that I made freaking, just for the shop, another he took $1,400. So I remember being like, okay. And then I went out, and Austin made good money that week. And so did David. We all went to the casino and we blew like half of it, right? And I was like, oh my God, I fucked up. Then next week, same amount again. So I started to get, for about a good 6 months, I just lived like that, where I was just like money in, money out, money in, money out. And then again, that control freak kind of left part of my brain was like, dude, like, this is not sustainable at all. Like, you need to put this stuff away. And so that's when I started at about 24, I would say. I started my IRA and stuff like that. And every month I just stuffed away money. And then I got a safe and I started stuffing money there. And so that extra wealth, I guess, like I just started to tuck away for retirement, because they don't give that. That's the thing they don't tell you.
Oh, weird. You guys don't have a retirement?
Dude, well, that's what's fucked up. These young kids want to be tattooers, and I say, listen, like, that's awesome. Like, I don't want to squash your passion for it. And I go, but there's some, like, realities, like some fiscal realities that you're not aware of. Like, there's no paid vacation. It's like, there's no freaking health benefits. And I go, there's no freaking retirement funds. There's none of that stuff. And if you want to do those things, you have to, like, my wife does all the time. Well, we don't travel if we don't do whatever. And I'm like, oh, okay. But when I take 10 days off, that's 10 days of money lost. You take 10 days off, you still got a paycheck coming in. And she doesn't sometimes understand that.
I'm in that same boat because as of right now, I'm still doing shift and still doing like working at a bar.
Yeah.
And it's one of those where it's like, it affords me the freedom and flexibility to do whatever I want.
Right.
Like to be available to do and talk to like whomever and a drop of a hat.
Yeah.
I can absolutely do that.
Right.
But the flip side is like there are times like where we're just like, oh, we should go do this. And I'm like, okay, well, like if we do that, like
it's fun.
Like we have a trip to Atlanta coming up and I'm excited to go, but we're going to be gone for like a full week.
Right.
But it's like and thankfully it's kind of like split between like 2 days and like the weekend, and I don't typically work weekends. Like that was, speaking of back to therapy, like I set boundaries and like I was like, if I'm going to do this, I need to start setting boundaries. So I'm just not like, because I will work.
Right.
And then I'll just burn myself out.
Right.
And it's like when you don't have it's funny, when you don't have a boss, you don't have a set schedule, you find so much freedom in setting a schedule for yourself. You're like, okay, well, I'm going to do this time.
Right.
And then like, so like today I knew like this is probably going to be most of the rest of my day.
Right.
So I was like, cool, I'm going to get up earlier.
Get all my stuff.
And I'm going to get all my shit done. And like, I had like 7 orders done by 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
But I fucking hustled.
Right.
And that's the thing is like when people are like, oh, I mean, when I say some of the numbers of like what I can make doing shift and people are like, really? And I'm like, yeah.
If you're self-motivated, you can fucking make that happen. Yeah.
If you're lazy as shit, you also ain't going to make fucking anything. And then you fucked yourself. I have that fear because I mean, I could be super broke, and I mean, I've lived that life, and it's fine. I would still live that and be like, meh, I don't mind like eating hot dogs and whatever. Like, I'm that person.
Right.
But I feel like I have an obligation to my wife to at least uphold my end of all the things that we do and things like that. And it's like, the reality of the situation is my wife makes so much fucking money at her job because she has a career and something that she's busted her ass and sacrificed so much of her life and time for.
Right.
That her reward is a really nice salary, and on top of that is like 4 weeks of paid vacation. But it becomes one of those that it's like, I'm never gonna have that. Like the only way I'll ever get that is going back into like food, where I have a ton of like management or retail, but then like holidays are blacked out because you need to be there. Weekends fucking gone.
Yeah, the sacrifice you have to make
like,
for that.
Okay, so and then it became a thing of like, all right, as long as I can pay my fucking bills and do this, I may not have the extra money like I used to, but I think I'm more richer in other experiences of being able to help her with the dog when we first got her, or being able to be like, hey, you want to go grab lunch today? Right. Or just, fuck it, I'm just going to take the day off and like hang out with you or whatever. Like, those are things that money can't buy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think as we've gotten older, like that's something that you and I have talked about a lot, especially in the fact of being married is like,
when you're grinding all the time, you start to lose that whole like,
why am I doing it?
Yeah, and it's like and the real satisfaction where it's like, it's nice to climb the mountain, but sometimes when you climb that mountain, you realize how all the things you sacrifice and I think about this all the time where I'm like, all this a perfect example, my wife in the summertime, in the wintertime she hibernates, doesn't do shit, but in the summertime every weekend she's got shit. Well, right now she's in Virginia with her best friend, and it's like, she does that. That's how she fills her heart and her
recharges.
I call it a life goblet. You know what I mean? It's like how you fill that thing up. And it's like, to me, it was always work, grind. Make your, lack of a better term, brand, like better. And then now it's like, and I'm not saying I'm at the top of the mountain, but I've climbed to a summit of sorts. And I can kind of sit back a little bit. But now it's like, sometimes it is, dude, like today, I literally woke up this morning. I was like, okay, I got John's thing, like over like 1 o'clock. And I went, what am I going to do before then? Oh, I'll work in the bathroom. And I started a little bit of it, and I'm like, oh, I'm good. And then I was like, what am I going to do after John's thing? And I went, I don't know. Like, I literally have made it where friends and family became such a off the side of the road, and my house stuff and my career were like the two things I did, and then a relationship I was in at the time. And now that I have a wife who she pours way more than I can into that stuff, now she does a lot of that stuff by herself. And I told her, I said, is this enough? Like, am I enough for this? Because I don't want, she goes, no, she goes, it's fine. She goes, I understand. Like, you give me as enough of you as I need. She goes, if anything, she goes, it's nice that I have a husband that doesn't give me shit to let me do this. And so when she does that, she goes, name me, because when I felt like guilty, and she's like, yeah, name me another couple that will allow their wife, yeah, exactly, right, other than you.
I raised my hand.
Yeah, name me another couple that would allow the other person to go out for a week with another friend and not be like, well, really? Oh, but like, without me? It's like, and I'm like, hey, like, that's what you want to do, go for it. Like, I can entertain myself. But with that being said, entertaining myself isn't as easy as it used to be. Like, I used to be so content with the most trivial of things. Now I'm kind of like, well, unless I'm bringing in money or distracting myself with a video game, it has to be something that, if it's not lucrative or a distraction, it has to be something that gives me satisfaction. And that's it. Those are the only three things I want. Is it lucrative? Is it distracting? Or is it literally satisfying me? I should fucking make that a bumper sticker. That's a really good idea. Because that's really all it is when we get to this age, man. Because now it's not like you and me. You remember like times we would all meet up and go to like the Orbit Room, right? And go like do a show. It was awesome. I had a great time. But the memory is more valuable to me than the actual action that we did. Seriously, because like I remember like all the funny stories when we were like pre-gaming in the car, and then we all walked in there, and we were VIP because you were fucking big dick walking.
The show.
Dude, you were big dick walking that day. Like you were just like all of a sudden they're like, oh, you're with John? Yeah, VIP. I was like, holy shit, look at John. But I remember doing all that, and the show was amazing. But I remember more about us talking, us laughing. Like that was the value to me, is the memory of us spending time together. And my wife is reminding me of that.
That's what shows are about.
Yeah.
Like, actually, it's funny. You said that your wife reminded you of that.
Yeah.
My wife at the Janet Jackson show I reviewed. So I started writing, because I'll jot notes, because like I have a good memory, but I also want to, like, if something's like, oh my God, I'm thinking of this. Like, you know what I did earlier, down, when watching the show, I was like, oh, that's good. I'm going to, like, I don't know where I'm going to use that, but I want to write it down and have it be a thought I expound upon with someone down the road. Sure. So I'm writing my notes with the Janet Jackson thing, and I'm like, you know, it sucks. The band's, like, fucking in the background. Like, I mean, for God's sakes, they're playing fucking Black Cat. There's a ripping-ass solo, and the dude's in the fucking back. Like, what the fuck?
Right.
And then, like, I'm like, Janet's clearly lip syncing. And then Bridget put her hand over my phone. She goes, look around you. And like, I look around, and she goes, no one gives a fuck about that. She goes, people just want to be entertained. They want to have a good time. They want to hear the songs that they fucking know, and they want them to sound a certain way.
Yes.
Because they're not like you come from rock musician guy where you're like, this is all bullshit.
Right.
They come from, these are the songs I fucking know. Hey.
Yeah,
and then it's like, as soon as she said that, I looked down. And like, because we were kind of in the nosebleeds, but you know, whatever. We got tickets on Grubhub on a Groupon.
Yeah.
And there's like this fucking older black couple, like 3-4 rows down. She's wearing like a bedazzled all white outfit, got her hair fucking did, her nails done, her man's wearing a nice fucking like nice pressed shirt. They're fucking dancing. And like right now, Chris, like for those who can't see, I got my eyes closed, I'm pointing it out, like I'm reliving this whole fucking moment.
Yeah. He's vibing.
And I was like, that's what it's about. That's
it.
really what that's what this is about. Like, arena shows aren't really, they're not really about like like when you go to a club and you're right there with a band, and you know, like there's fuck ups and it's about being like the sweat and the camaraderie. Right. This is about a show and being entertained.
Exactly. And the memory with the people. Not, I mean, like the music is amazing, but it's secondary. Yeah, it's like secondary.
And like how it made you feel, or you know, like you know, potentially that couple.
I think that is exactly why though we loved house shows, because it forces that out of there. Now you have to experience the band, like, because there was no room to fucking just be off in the corner drinking. Yeah, like you had to like the room you were in was not only the stage but also the area you were in, so it forced you to be like, okay, this is a memory, but you're gonna remember the band. You know what I mean? But at a show of that magnitude, it's definitely the music. Yeah, but it's like they come out of there like, oh, remember when we went to Janet Jackson's show and like blah 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 did this and he puked on himself, and we went over here and like, you know, Rachel and blah 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 said each other, they love each other for the first time. You know, like it's all these like memories that'll happen, and that's more important to them than the music that was playing in the back.
And that was the thing for me where it made me realize that music is multifaceted like that.
Oh,
and it's
100%.
more about
100%.
the experiences with the people that we,
Yeah.
I can tell you about a ton of shows I've gone to with people I don't even hang out with anymore.
Yeah.
But I still look back on those memories fondly.
Absolutely.
And that's the thing that I think is kind of crazy. Like, I think that's the thing even about tattoos. Like, there are a lot of people who will stop me and be like, man, you got really great tattoos. And I'm like, no, I got some shit ones too. Like, but I know I have shit ones. But to me, like, my Vegas one.
Yeah.
Like, Bridget recently got hers and it didn't heal all that great because it's like diamonds to do them, and especially smaller, are hard. It's like very lot of fine line details.
Right.
And depending, just sometimes spots on your bodies don't heal all that great, and it just is what it is.
But it's got a good story.
But like, so to me, I think the fact that my Vegas tattoo is a little trashy looking, it isn't perfect. I'm like, that's Vegas though. It's rough and tumble, and it ain't gonna but the memory is still there, and I had fun, and I'm like,
absolutely.
Yeah, did I pay way too fucking much for this tattoo? Absolutely.
Of course I did.
But here's the other thing: when I went to Atlanta, and the same thing happened, like, and the dude wanted to charge me $200 for a little fucking peach, and he wouldn't even acknowledge me and said it through the fucking desk person that was like, we were all a foot and a half away from each other, and I'm like, you can't even acknowledge me. I might have done it for the story and the experience of getting a tattoo with a friend of mine, like while we're there in Atlanta about a month ago.
Right.
But when you're not even going to acknowledge me, I'm like, no, that's not the right vibe. I don't even want to get anything.
That's not a good memory you want to hold on to. Yeah,
so,
for sure.
It's one of those like where it's funny that your profession is so closely linked to nostalgia and memories. Like, and you have music playing.
My wife told me that all the time. She's like, how do you feel that like you've been doing this almost 2 decades, and it's like there are people.
I get older, they stay the same age.
Seriously, well, there are people that are in other countries that have left, but they have pieces of you, and that your name is going to be brought up thousands and thousands of miles from where you're at right now. She goes, I get it why like traveling to you is like you enjoy it, but it's so secondary because it's like you travel. Whether or not you're staying put or not, your work travels. So if you find somebody that does something like that memory, that capacity, your work is going out into the world. And I didn't really think about it that way. I always thought about it like, well, I'm doing work. And it's actually the worst thing too, because there's unfinished pieces that I'll never finish that are just out there floating out there because like life happened for them. And then they're like, well, I'll come back. I'm like, okay. And I'm always like dice roll, like maybe you will, maybe you won't. Most times they don't. And so.
Hold on a second. Yeah. Let me ask you this, because I literally just thought of this as you said that. Do you feel that has conditioned you to always assume that people are going to leave and not come back in life?
Oh, you mean in life? Like when people just like say,
to not hold people at their, I don't want to say face value, but at their word. Because so much of your job is that. It's lip service. You know
what's actually fucked up is I commit so much of that yeah, because I tell this. What's fucked up is you remember when you and me, you maybe actually you probably do because you have a better memory than I do. But I remember we had this conversation one time where it talked about your word and when you say things, and that there's this honesty that everyone thinks that people want that. People think that they want honesty. So you and me are very much like cut from the same cloth in that capacity. Like I've never minced words with you. You've never minced words with me. We say sometimes a brutally honest truth to each other. But that doesn't translate so well to everybody else because people, when they say they want honesty, they don't want the blunt honesty. They want a whitened or chocolate, softened, edged up reality of that. And so I started to say to people, like a perfect example is my sister-in-law has a new person in her life, and he's a really nice dude, and I actually really enjoy him, but he really wants to hang out with me, like a lot. And it's weird because I don't know if he'll ever hear this or if my sister-in-law Jamie's ever going to hear this, but I mean this in the nicest way. He's a really nice guy, but I said to him, I was like, listen, man, like I'd love to do all that, but like I got all the friends I kind of need. Like, if you want to go out and like have a blackjack night, or you want to like get together with Jamie and my wife and all that stuff and like have some drinks, I'm totally down. I'm like, oh, but the whole like, let's start doing things together. There are people that I hold much closer to myself than you that don't even get that type of time with me. And it's not because I'm Mr. My Time. It's just people use up so much of my personal battery of needing to talk to people when I work, that at the end of the day, or even on the weekends, I either want to do a project or I just want to veg and do nothing. And the people that I do on my days off, like you, like come to see, it's because that there's a certain amount of refilling of that battery because I don't feel it's work to talk to you, and some, especially new people, it's hard sometimes to, you know what I mean? Like keep that momentum because now we're just learning about each other. So now it's work because now I have to be like, so what do you
remember those things.
And you got to remember that shit. Exactly. So to me, it's like, I just, back to the question of do I feel that, with tattooing, am I conveying that, or the original question? I'm sorry.
The question was more, do you feel that because in your profession, a lot of people will go, oh, I'm going to come back. Or,
Okay, that false equivalence. Yeah.
That basically it has made you, I don't want to say be distant from people, but just, I feel like it because if I heard oh, I'm gonna recommend you to so many people, or I'm gonna do this, that eventually when you see that it doesn't ever manifest into anything, that you just start going well, people are full of shit, or more to the point, you get to the real crux of it, which is people have lives, shit happens, and it's not the end of the fucking world, and you just take it at face value. But I feel like when you're younger and you're going through that, you take it personally, and then therefore it probably manifests itself in probably unhealthy ways in real relationships that you're trying to form.
There was definitely, and it's weird because now I have kind of a spider sense about it where, when someone, it's funny, it's like when someone says to me, it's like, oh dude, I'll be back, I promise. When I feel that good from them, I go, yeah. And 99% of the time I'm right. But I also have the people, like you said, it's dude, I need this. They go, oh, I'm going to recommend you and I'll be in. Or, perfect example, when I first moved here to GR in 2007, I remember this dude, I can't remember his fucking name because I try to block him out of my mind. But straight up, 5 times I would run into him at Mulligan's. And every single fucking time you'd go, Bettley, man, what's up, dude? And I'd always be like, hey, man, how's it? I'm me. I'm like, and that's actually when your wife was like, of course, kind of fake. But that wasn't fake. I tried to be very open and inviting to people. So I'd just be like, hey, how's it going? But anyways, he would come up to me 5 times and he'd be like, oh, come in. On the 5th time, and I was just had my 3rd drink in me, so my fucking filter was completely eviscerated or evaporated. And I looked at him and I said, dude, I go, listen, I love that you come up and talk to me. I do. I think you're a nice guy. Stop fucking saying you're going to stop in my studio. This is the 5th time in 6 months. Haven't seen you. Stop fucking saying it. Just say, hey, Bettley, good to see you. Or, hey, man, want to have a drink? Great. Or, how's the video? Or talk to me about something, anything but tattoos. But the more you said this, man, the more you're pissing me off because I feel you're just fucking lying to me.
Well, on top of that, it only makes you a one-dimensional person.
Right. Okay, back to what you're talking about. Do I think that that's where my distance started? Yes. Because I'm a private person, all I put out is tattoos, that's really only people have to go on with me. And my wife brought that up to me. She's like, you kind of did that to yourself because you didn't put out Christopher Bettley, or I'm sorry, you didn't put out, just Chris. You were Christopher Bettley. So you put out this fucking product expectation of that's all he is to everybody else. Now, and then you get mad that you expect people to talk to you about other stuff. Well, all they know is what you show them. And it's only tattoos. Now, could people dig more? Sure, for sure. But in this day and age, I get it. Where they're, I don't know. But now that I'm getting older, I don't care as much. Now I'm just if that's what they know me for, rad. That makes me feel good because I've worked very hard for it to be there. It's just sometimes when I go to I like this, you and me, one-on-one, or 4 or 5 people. That, I went sailing with some friends for 4th of July.
Yeah, we were literally there at the exact same time.
Were you really?
We were going to try to go to the deck.
Yeah.
And then there was a massive line, so we're no, fuck it. And then we just went to the
Dude, that's a sweet
beach,
restaurant,
I know,
man.
we talk about taking people there all the time, and everyone's oh, Muskegon.
Oh, no.
Whatever.
That's a diamond. Oh, shit, yeah. That's a diamond in the rough,
dude,
man.
They're frozen whiskey Coke.
Oh, my Lord. They're amazing, yeah.
But it was funny. I saw Kristen post. I was we were literally at the exact same place at the exact same time, just didn't know it.
Oh, jeez. So yeah, it was but I really enjoy that. But then there's times where it's I'll go to for example, I went to my nephew-in-law's graduation, and there was one girl there who was 18, 19. She followed me and said, on
Instagram.
Instagram, yes.
Because that sounded a little creepy the other
Oh,
way.
I'm sorry. Follow me on Instagram. Social media, not actually following me. And so she like immediately when she looked at me, she's like, oh. And then my wife tells me that she goes like, oh, well, she follows you on Instagram. Like she just wants to meet you. I was like, oh, cool. And so I went, I met her and she's like, I love it. And then all of these 17, 18-year-old kids all knew what I did. They all went on their Instagram and they all started looking at my stuff. And then I was bombarded by people. Now, some people could hear that and be like, oh, fucking so sad, man. Like people know, no. It's different because
Now you got to put on customer service. Maybe.
Yes, and where all I wanted to do is disconnect from that. Like, imagine having something that when you're in another space, like people at Burger King don't have to deal with that. People who are fucking real estate agents don't have to deal with that shit. They go, my face, my name is directly connected to the service I provide. So when they talk to me, they're talking to me, the person who can create it for them. It's almost like a film director, you know what I mean? It's like, oh, I have this idea, you know, for their film, and they're just like, dude, like, I don't, or even you, it's like, you know, like with a podcast thing, or like when you were in bands, it's like people go, oh, you know what I think we should do? And you're like, dude, I kind of just want to not think about my job right now, you know? Like, to you, it's cool. To me, that's my job. That's what I do every day.
Thought about you a long time ago, actually. So I have a few friends, actual friends, and you'll probably, maybe you won't get this quite the same because people actually follow through at least once or twice.
Sure.
I was talking to a fellow podcaster for an episode that's coming out soon, and then I made the comment about, like, I was like, oh, I mean, does anyone listen to your show? Like, any of your close friends or family? He goes, no. And I was like, yeah, it doesn't bother you, right? And he goes, no. And I was like, and then, so, like, we were talking about that, and I was like, but the point I was making, I was like, what's interesting sometimes is, because this and very much like tattoos, it's such a snapshot of that specific moment.
Absolutely, yeah.
I've had people who, like, you know, if they're close friends, will text me and they'll be like, "Oh my god, blah 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 blah," and they'll like just start going on about something.
Yeah.
And to get it so out of nowhere when I'm not in this space or talking about this, I was like, "The fuck are you talking about?"
It like destabilizes you.
And then they go, "Oh, well, in this thing," I'm like, "All right," and then I'll have that epiphany where I'm like, you're bringing up an episode from like 4 years ago.
Yeah. When I went to freaking South Dakota, man, I remember I texted you, I said I listened to the one with you and Rush and Brian, you know, where you guys are like, it was like a 4-hour podcast. You guys were talking about everything under the sun, but you guys got into some really like religious topics, political topics. And I remember it was rad because it was the one time ever that I knew the people I was hearing, but I didn't feel like I was listening to my friends talk. I feel like I was listening to personalities converse. Yeah. And that's what made it a good podcast, is that I know you guys personally, but like when I was listening to it, I was like, oh, I could be anybody. Yeah. And this was like a really intelligent conversation between, you know, 3 individuals. And so that was, but I remember texting you that and you went, I was actually driving back from South Dakota and I was probably like 4 hours into the drive, and I texted you, I was like, oh, dude, that podcast is awesome. Like, you know, like I just finished listening to it, and you went, weird. That was your thing, like weird.
So it's funny you bring that up. I literally, like, probably 20 minutes before you got here. So something, like I was saying, one of the other podcast people I know texted me, and he was like, you know, you're kind of bad at getting compliments. Like, you just kind of steamroll over them. You do. You don't do well with it. And I go, yeah, and, you know, we already talked about that. But it was funny because he was just like he goes, are you aware that you do it? I was like, yeah, it's like a deflecting mechanism. And he goes, why? And I go, well, I think in therapy I just realized, like, you know, just I think I hold others in such high regard for what they do that I'm like, oh, like you're trying to, like, I feel like all of a sudden, like, oh, like now I'm an equal in something. I'm like, no, like it's like imposter syndrome a little bit. Or
do you feel like feeling good about yourself is somehow a crime?
Well, no, so in this capacity, like, and you know, you commented earlier and it reminded me of like Porter from Atreyu, like he and I are actually really good friends because of this. Yeah. And, you know, when we did like we did 2 hours I posted. We did it on its Twitch. We went 6 fucking hours on its Twitch talking. Like, just talking about shit and life and stuff. And it's still up on Twitch if you want to go fucking ever see it. But yeah, it was one of those things where, you know, he was like, you know, you have this gift. And I was like, I don't think talking is a gift. And then he said the same thing. And he was like, well, I mean, it is. Because like, you have to, especially when you know how to, like, know when to not talk. Yeah. When to let someone or expound upon something, or you know, it is a skill you have to learn how to do and do well, especially if you're doing quote unquote interviews or whatever. And it's one of those where I guess because it's not that I don't value conversation, because I do. That's why I started this. I think that's like literally what you and I had said at Mulligan's when I was like, I just miss. That's why I love Mulligan's, because you can't use your phone.
Right. Yeah, it's a fucking lead shelled.
But it's one of those to me where it is, like we said earlier, we existed before all the distractions.
Yeah.
So I learned how to thrive in those environments of either being funny, being able to carry a conversation. That's why I know a lot about dumb, trivial shit and have a wealth of knowledge on a lot of different things.
Right.
Because it's how you would be, it was your social currency.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a perfect way to say it.
And so to me, doing this isn't, I don't think it takes talent or skill. I think it just takes time. It literally takes your time, which is the most valuable commodity we have.
The only thing I would say is that to kind of be devil's advocate with that is that the talent is in this, is that there's very few, well, I don't say few, but it is a talent to be able to take a stream of consciousness and as you're thinking, to say them without running over on top of your thoughts. And I do that often. Like, I've probably done it like at least twice on this podcast, where like I'll start thinking of something, I go like, well, there's the thing, and you have a very beautiful way of just, you'll take your thought and you, on the fly, like just in a, like, you know, an unconventional way, have a way of taking your thoughts and make it a streamlined consciousness and speaking out loud like that. And that's very hard to do, and not sound like you're stuttering or like toppling over your own thoughts.
Two things though. I think that actually three, now that I'm really thinking about it. Three, I think it comes from when I would listen to foreigners. I've always said this, the best thing you can do and the best people to learn how to talk to people, listen to foreigners talk. People from non-America who English isn't their first language.
Yeah.
When they don't know what they're going to say, they stop. They think about it.
They take a minute,
and then they articulate themselves as best they can.
Yeah.
Secondly, hip-hop, freestyling.
Oh, God.
Like,
that's all cadence.
It's all cadence, but it's also just not being afraid to fall flat on your face either.
Right.
But I also think that comes from my love of like comedy.
Oh, yeah.
Of like stand-up. Like...
Yeah.
Like
ad-libbing. Right?
Yeah, like I make jokes all the time. Like I make jokes all the time, and I go, look, they're not only going to be great, but like, like as someone made the joke, it's like you're never going to throw a touchdown sitting on the, or you're never going to score a touchdown sitting on the sidelines.
Yeah,
and it's like, so you can't be afraid to like. I pride myself on being funny. I know I'm funny, maybe not in like a more direct way. Like I'm more off of like I play off of people.
But probably
really well.
For every like 1 to 2 like bangers you throw out there, there's probably
I probably got like 5 to 10.
Yeah, 5 or 10 that just like meh.
But the other thing is, my sense of comedy is also playing off of people.
Yeah.
I have to wait for someone to kind of set something up for me, and then I go, boom, there's something. You probably didn't notice that. That's why I'm making
Mystery Science Theater 3000. You remember that show? That was it too, where it's like those 3 guys would just like bounce off each other, and it always tended to be that Crow would kind of set it up. And then Joel
those were scripted
and
a lot more.
Oh, was it really?
Yeah, because I know when sorry to ruin that for you.
That really was.
Because when Jonah,
I mean, I'm sure it was a little bit like...
Yeah, it's like ad-lib.
Like the premise was probably like scripted.
But like I know when Jonah from X Nerdist podcast took over as the host, he would talk about when they knew the movies they were picking, they would write jokes for
scenes.
So they could set each other up.
Oh, okay, gotcha. But then that stuff tended to be a little ad-lib?
Sometimes, like, it might be like, oh, it'd be funny if this happened. Oh, and then you punch, as the term is, you punch up the joke.
Right.
Until it's the best it can be.
Right.
But, I mean, that's sort of like, I think, why my original interview style came from. I'm punching up my questions, like, because I'm working on it.
That's the truth, yeah.
And on top of that, who the fuck's going to work on something to put out bullshit? Like, I'm not going to sit there for 2-3 hours coming up with questions and then be like, well, this is the best I have. It's garbage, so let me ask you these garbage questions.
Right.
Like, there's a little bit of accountability there.
You actually said, too, that sometimes the time crunch that they would allow you to talk with them also kind of like where they would be like, well, we only got 15 minutes. So for you, you're like, okay, that's maybe 3 questions, maybe 2. So you're like, if I'm going to give it to them, I don't want to give them fluff. Like, I want to get right to the meat of it. And you said that kind of helped you.
This is such a, and again, it comes back to music. Do you want to know the thing that really changed my mindset on taking 10, 15, 20-minute interviews?
Yes, I do.
So when Bohemian Rhapsody was about to come out, and obviously they talked about how they tried to go shot for shot on the Live Aid concert.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I went back, it was like I think a lot of people obviously did, and watched that Live Aid show. It only had 22 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
Watch that set. Minute 1, Own the Crowd.
Yep.
Burned it down.
Yep.
One of the most legendary concerts and performances ever.
Ever.
But like, if I were to tell you, like, how long was that? Oh, that was probably like 45 minutes to an hour. No,
22 minutes.
Like 22 minutes.
Yeah.
And like, it proved to me that you can do some, like, you know, one of the other podcast people I talked to is like, oh, I won't do anything less than an hour because like you can't get to the meat and potatoes of anything less.
Right.
And
you were like, challenge accepted.
I do agree with him. I think there's sometimes things that, you know, like a lot of people say Rogan gets interesting at like hour 3 because at that point, like the walls and defenses are down. So now someone's that's where you really start getting into somebody. But like to me, I think I like a challenge, and to me, it's like, okay, what can I do in 15, 20 minutes? Can I get something out of you? And more importantly, can I at least leave a lasting impression? Like, you know, you made the comment of like, oh, that's a good question. Like, you know, I did it to you, and I literally was saying I want to start a podcast, and I threw some questions out to you, and you're like, ooh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
If I can get one of those in every, like, an episode, fucking win for me.
Yeah. If you can get somebody to stop and go, wow,
like they don't have a canned answer ready.
Exactly, because like for the most part, you know, most interviewers probably ask them the same bullshit over and over and over again. So when you throw them a freaking curveball, they're just go, oh, wow, okay, never thought about that, and they. Yeah, and it's good because then I feel that because that they're not asked that, you're probably gonna get the most honest answer because it's not scripted. It's not something that they've like perfected. What was that what was that thing you said where it's like a
preconceived
no, we were saying about their scripted kind of thing where like they're you just said it a little while ago, but they're a couple seconds ago. But yeah, it was like where like they've been asked it so many times that they have found kind of a narration that they know what to kind of spill off. Yeah. But when you give them that, they just go, oh, well, you know, and that again, that's what I said. Again, a talent. You have a talent at that. You're not satisfied with fluff. Like if anything, you know what would have been another thing for you too. Like you've been a great journalist. But here's the thing. I actually think you would make a real great journalist because most journalists are like, I want to, and especially now today's journalism is sensationalism and taking things and just ramping them up. Where like I don't think would want to do that. You would be like, I want to give the most poignant questions to get the most honest answers. Now I want to make sure that I'm asking the things that everybody else wants to hear, but you would do it in a framework that wouldn't just be the same bullshit. And that's a talent, man. That really is. Like whether or not you want to accept that or not, you have a talent at that. You know,
I think that was like the thing I kind of realized with the I don't want to call it a failed documentary, but like just the fact that it's kind of got the legs taken out from under it. I think at this point, I think points to the fact that it's not going to come to the fruition the way I wanted it to. Uh-huh. But I think the Run the Jewels documentary thing I was working towards, I think kind of showcased that where it's like, you know, 12 different breweries involved. I want to have FaceTime with all of them. I want to ask them, like, what do you ask? And I sat there for, like, probably 2 weeks. And I was
that's nice. You and Rush, stuff like that, talking about doing that? Yeah.
And it's like, what the fuck do you ask? And how do you get it to where it's poignant to get... It's the same question, but it's open-ended enough that people will then go wherever with that question.
Right.
And, like, it's like I've only gotten to do one interview so far, and it was with the fucking brewery out in the Netherlands. And I think it went like almost 30 minutes of us then talking, like, after that, like, after my 2 questions. But, like, the information I got from it, I was like, oh, my God, like, this could... And then it, like, showed me because of how much I had. I was like, if that's one, and I got a half hour...
Right.
And I have 11 more of these...
Ugh.
And I was like... No wonder, like, people have director's cuts and shit. And I was like, but then it starts doing, like, what do you whittle away? How do you whittle it down? And then it's like, That's why I was like, I am only going to ask 2 questions because at most, like, I shouldn't provide too much.
Has there been any, like, painful interviews, like, where you're just, like, you're trying to dig at them? And you don't have to say names if you don't want to, but,
I've said this before, and I think it's for an episode 300, I think it's great to kind of reflect a little bit. So sometimes I get shopped interviews, and I really just don't want them.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, I just don't see the value. So I was shopped this band Audiotopsy, which had Matt and Greg from Mudvayne, the drummer and the guitar player.
Okay.
And I was like, I don't want to. And the other half of the band was the dudes in Scrape.
Oh, okay.
And so I was like, band's just okay. I don't really dig it. Whatever. Like, I don't really want to do it. Passed on it. Actually, I just didn't reply. And then, hey, just checking back.
Wanted to see if you wanted to do it.
And I was like, no. Like, I didn't reply to that. I was like, all right, maybe after the second email, they'll be like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then I got a third one. And then I got a fourth one.
Holy
and it was
shit.
Just like, and I'm so writing on the wall, no one wants to fucking talk to these guys. They're desperate for any press.
Wow.
It's how I took it anyway.
Yeah.
Not going to put words in other people's mouths.
Yeah.
So I was like, fine, I'll talk to Greg. They're like, okay, here's the thing. Can't talk about Mudvayne at all. And I was like, all right.
Kind of all I got.
And like, I kind of want to be like, I mean, I get it. Like, it's not Mudvayne. But like, it's like, okay, it's hard when you essentially have a quote unquote super group of two other bands that you're forming together with members.
But I can't talk about the other.
I can't talk really about the one. And so like when writing my questions, I was just like, what, like, this is the second record you've done, but it's been years in between releases because you guys are both busy with your other bands. So I mean, it's like there's questions where you have to
reference. You have to reference it at least. Yeah.
So, and I don't want to give this tip away, but like something I've always found for me, if you want to break, ask hard questions, or you want to ask something kind of shitty, but you want to not take ownership of the shitty question. At least in this medium, it's always the fans. I saw online people, nameless, faceless people.
Yeah.
And then you can ask the question because it gives you the autonomy to not get the brunt of asking the shitty question.
Oh.
I've learned that a long time ago. Like you were saying, people don't want the truth.
Yeah.
Well, if I put it on nameless, faceless people, well, then I don't have to like.
You have to take a responsibility for that. Yeah. Because it's not me asking it. It's this.
I saw it online.
Wraith. Yeah. In the middle of nowhere.
And so I had made the comment, I was like, is it hard, I'm seeing, and legitimately I did see this, but like, more to the point though, but I was like, I'm seeing people who are like, oh, I wish, Scrape would come back, or I wish Mudvayne would come back, or whatever, and it's like, this music isn't either of those bands. It might have influences from those bands, because you guys are in those bands.
Right.
I was like, is it tough, your second record coming out, and people are still wanting either of those bands, but maybe they did more so. And I always, whenever I would mention the two bands, I always mention Scrape first.
Right.
I never put Mudvayne as the priority or whatever.
Right.
And so I was like, is it just tough? Like, like you're putting all of you are putting your all into this band, and people are just wanting it to be this other band.
Right.
I was like, does that suck? Like, what is that like? Like, because I feel like that would be hard being
these expectations
creatively satisfied, only to know that commercially it's going to fall flat because it's not the other thing that you're not doing.
Right.
And that, people can't understand that it's creating, or it's scratching a different creative itch for you or whatever. And then he was like, yeah, it's not fucking Mudvayne, and Chad's not the fucking singer, and he like fucking went off.
Whoa.
And then I was like,
This is the guitarist that you're talking to? Okay.
But like the whole time it was like pulling teeth. Like I'd ask, like I listened to the record, I didn't like it, but I found, like I did with discography discussion, where I was like, oh, we're doing mostly death metal and black metal bands, and I'm not really into that, and it's like it'd be easy for me to be like, oh, it sucks and I don't like it. But it's like, okay, let's take the real adult approach and be like, okay, let's give it its due. Let's try to find something you like about it.
Let's be objective as we possibly can be, right?
Because here's the thing. Someone likes this.
Yeah,
it's someone's favorite band song, whatever.
Audience
Same with this. This guy likes it. He thinks it's really good. Otherwise, I would assume he wouldn't have put it out.
Right.
So for me to be like, I think it's dog shit. Why'd you put out dog shit? Like, no one wants to hear that.
Right.
So let me find interesting questions that I give a fuck about, and let me ask you those.
Right.
And
he still just...
And he just was like, the whole gamut, he just like didn't seem like he wanted to fucking be there, didn't want to like, gave me short choppy answers, and I was like, and I want to be like, dude, fuck yourself. I turned this down 4 fucking times because I don't give a fuck about it.
Yeah.
So if you don't, then let's just be done and not waste our time.
Let's not do this,
And so at least like when that happened, and then a whole bunch of news sites picked up on some of the Mudvayne chatter that he was like, people just got to be patient and it'll happen when it happens. And then coincidentally, when Mudvayne came back, I got like a third bite at that apple where they're like, and on this one, Greg said this, and on this one, Ryan said these things. And it's funny how that works. So it got me a lot of exposure, but it's like, I didn't want to do it, but I mean, it's like, there's a lot of like, I mean, again, working customer service, there's a lot of things I have to fucking do or say or whatever, the face I have to put on, and I don't want to fucking do it, but I have to.
Sometimes you have to eat shit.
And it's like, this was a thing for a while. Like, it's funny, another full circle moment I had doing the podcast was that band that's from here, Sleepwaker, that by the time this comes out, it'll probably already be out. Actually, no, it won't. Because I forgot this is getting pushed right to like this weekend. But it was a thing where in talking to them, I was like, to the drummer, I was like, I wanted this show to be something different initially. Like I wanted it to be an avenue for our local scene to get some exposure. And, you know, I'm talking to the up and coming bands and my local bands and, you know, touring bands that are coming through that maybe people don't know or whatever.
Yeah.
And I was like, and then I would reach out to those people and they're like,
Yeah.
And then once I was like, all right, well, again, pivoting, I was like, I guess the local scene doesn't want me. So I'm just going to focus on getting bigger guests.
Yeah.
And then I started getting bigger guests. And then the local band started being like, hey, we'd like to come on the show. And I'm like,
weird how that works.
and then it's like, you know, when I told someone, they're like, hey, maybe you can play, like, and the thing that always gets me, and I get a lot of these emails, and I don't know if you get this, I don't know what the comparison to this would be for you other than just straight copying someone else's art.
Yeah.
But I'll get emails, and I know they're blast emails or they're just copy pasted emails, whatever, from like bands or whatever. Like, hey, we're putting out a new record. We were just wondering if you would like to review our album. And I'm like, if you actually are such a fan like you say you are in the first part of your email where you're sucking my dick, you would know I don't do album reviews.
Yeah.
Like, so, and then like one day I got frustrated with it enough, and I'd been at the bar, and I was just like, I'm gonna give you the same service you gave me, or I'm gonna give you the same amount of time you gave me. Would love to review your record. I was like, because you know I love reviewing albums and all that kind of stuff. You're such a fan, you know that I love reviewing records.
Yeah,
I've never reviewed I've never reviewed a record on my thing. I was like, if I have learned anything in this industry from the multifacets that I've worked in it, don't bullshit people. Be fucking honest, because guess what? Someone's going to catch you in either a lie or a fucking whatever.
Yeah, be transparent.
And just be transparent. Like, you can tell me, like, hey, we're just blast emailing everyone. We're just trying to get the name, the word out. Absolutely. But then I'm going to come at you from a business perspective, like I did with some bands, where I'm like, cool, $50, I'll play your fucking song in the middle of the episode.
Right.
It's a business. It's a business transaction. Like, you see value in something I've done.
Right.
So, yeah, I'm not taking advantage of you because I know other shows that charge fuckload more than me.
Right.
But $50, you obviously see value in something I'm doing because you wouldn't have reached out to me otherwise.
Right.
So if it's worth it to you, put the money down.
Right. Yeah.
And to me, it's like, I don't know what that equivalent is in your thing other than, I've been following you for so long. Can you do this watercolor for me? And then you're like, have you seen me do watercolor?
You know what's weird is like, the only time ever, and this is actually the only comparison I can make is I don't get emails like that because I filter that stuff. I give an auto response, and like that basically filters people out where it's like,
oh, I have those on socials now too.
Oh yeah,
so
well
great.
it's so absolutely, because it's like it makes it so the people who are serious will actually follow up and go. So when I do have people come in though, sometimes the only thing I would say is comparable is that someone will come in and they're like, oh my God, like I love, you know, this piece, or I've followed you for a time, and I'm like, great. But then they do this whole thing where they're like, oh, so like a perfect example is like, I want a watercolor tattoo. I'm like, well, I appreciate that. And I go, but this is the person I'd recommend. They go, well, I want you to do it. And I go, but you're not asking for my work. You're asking for something. They go like, but you're a great artist. And I go, so that actually, I started to think, I'm like, there are 3 types of people that want to get, or that come to an artist. One is that they're just the walk-in, like whatever, they just want their little pop. And then there's the 2. Then there's the collectors. The collectors are the ones that actually say, okay, this person's black and gray realism, this person is biomech, this person is American traditional. So when I want those pieces styles, I'm going to go to this person because I enjoy it. And then there's the 3rd that just see a good artist. They see the level, even the subject matter isn't what they want, but they see the level that what it's at. But again, it's the same way that I tell people this is like, listen, like I'll take the Pepsi challenge with realism and maybe a little bit with neo-traditional, American traditional, but I know people who do better than me than that. But don't ask me to do biomech, because here's the thing. I'm going to fuck it up. It's going to look like shit. I could probably fake it a little bit, but you wouldn't love it. Like you want that, you go to freaking like Sean Peters or Ty Riemann or Roman or Guy Atchison. You know what I mean? Like those are the biomech, for even coming back first look on this, masters of what they do.
I was trying to think, didn't Bob Terrell do that shit for a little bit? Or am I thinking of someone completely different out of Detroit?
You're not thinking of Bob Tyrell, basically, and God, if Bob Tyrell ever heard this, he would probably laugh in my face, but it's true. He was more of a Paul Booth mimic in his early career, which Paul Booth kind of did.
Shouts out to him. Hope he pulls through.
Yeah, with his neck. So, he had vertebrae. Yeah, it sucks, man. But Paul Booth wasn't really doing, like, I mean, he did a little bit. It was a little Giger inspired. And I never know it's Geiger or Giger.
Oh my God, I was just gonna say the same thing.
Yeah, I would say that. I'm like, is it Giger or Geiger?
Well, hold on. Is he European?
Yeah, he's from.
Then I bet it's Giger.
I bet it's Giger. I think I'm saying it right because I heard 5 artists once say like oh Giger, HR Giger. I'm like, yeah, that's Giger. But God damn it, what was I talking about?
You were talking about Bob Torello, Paul Booth.
Oh, yeah. So
him.
he was mimicking Paul Booth. And Paul Booth had a little bit of that Giger-inspired work. But then it became more of this amorphous, demonic, like black and gray. And then Bob Tyrell just went just black and gray portraiture. And that's really where he went. And then guys like Tom Renshaw and stuff like that. But Tom Renshaw went more nature, where he did like more like animals and mountainscapes and shit like that. And all amazing. But yeah, so... I sometimes I see people and it sucks because they look at me and they're like, but I want you to do it. And I go, I know that. I'm like, but you're not asking what I do. And again, like I think you asked before, it's like, when did I start like going down this very specific lane? Because it was just realism and neo-trad, but then I'm kind of pushing out neo-trad, where back to that, jack of all trades, master of none. That's really, and I thought that was bullshit when I was younger, when someone's like, oh, well, yeah, pick one craft, because you're going to be mediocre at everything else if you try to be everything. And I said, bullshit, I can be, and I did get some, actually, Gary Merrill, rest in peace, he gave me one of the best compliments. I still have it screenshotted and saved on my Instagram, but here's the thing, he meant it 100% as a compliment, but it bummed me out because I had like people like Don Cook, and I feel like I'm name dropping a lot, but all these great artists that I respect saying this compliment to me, but I hated it. They were like, but Gary Merrill, back to him, what he said, he goes, how can you be 4 amazing tattooers in one body? That's a great compliment. Because he's saying I do all these different styles, but they all look really great. But I was like, I don't want to be Christopher Bettley. He can do anything. Like, I want to be, when you hear black and gray realism or color realism in Michigan, at least, these are the top 5, top 10 guys or girls you want to go to. That's what I wanted more than anything. And straight up, that's when I told my wife, I said, once I started Last Rogue, I did 1 more year of kind of neo-trad. These last 2 years, I've just been like, I think I just want to do realism and mostly black and gray. And she's like, you're going to cut out a lot of your clientele. I'm like, I don't think I'm going to. I think honestly, like they're gonna respect it's what I do, and this is the framework that I have to go on, because no one wants to get anything from anybody in any craft if they're not inspired or into it. That's just fucking fact. Same thing with your guy. Like that fucking PR agent, if they were doing spam emails, should have been like, this fucking dude does not want to do this interview. And he's not going to be, and you actually gave it the old college try and did it, and that guy gave you fucking dick. He gave you nothing, so it's kind of
yeah. I mean, 2 things to that, actually, and I just was talking about this person the other day, because he was one of the first people to tattoo me, but to see where he's come from being a walk-in shop person to what he does, and it's very specific, Johnny Andrews.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I have 2 pieces by him from when he worked down in Kalamazoo, when I had just started getting tattooed.
Yeah.
Actually, 2. I was like, maybe I have 3. But it's like, if I were to show you what Johnny did on me, and I show you what Johnny does now, you'd be like, what the fuck?
It's all space hyper-realism, and it's gorgeous.
And nature,
it's great.
and all that kind of, like, natural, like, mountains and all that
We
kind
send
of shit.
each other work, actually, because, I mean, I love space stuff, but I don't love to do it that much, and he does it better than I do. So I send people that, and he sent me, like, he does face stuff, but then he was like, there was this horror piece that he sent me. He's like, listen, like, I love to do it. He's like, but I got a full plate. He's like, and I know you do it better than me. You know what I mean? It's like, it's that respect level. But you're right. There's this thing where I tell people this all the time. Like, you don't want your artist to give you 100%. Any professional will give you 100%. You want 110. That 110 is that little extra that makes a good tattoo a great tattoo.
Well, so even that's the best segue I could ever ask for this.
Yeah.
You essentially have taught me how to let go, where I feel like I used to want, like, everything had to be my way. Like, I started getting stuff by you, and I would just be like, all right, I know you're gonna, like, either draw it on, like, stencil it around literally my body, draw it on for my body. It's not gonna be like, all right, I got A7, these are arms, that'll go on yours, and here we go.
Right.
But it was a thing where I would say there's probably, 2 or 3 pieces I had by you that it's like, when people see them, they're like, wow, that's amazing. I'm like, yeah. And they're like, what's it mean? I was like, I don't know. Trust in the person that I had that they're going to do something good, and it's not going to look like garbage.
Yeah.
And it's like, they're like, oh, well, why'd you get him? I was like, support my friend.
Yeah.
Spend time with him.
Spend time with him.
And they're like, oh. And I was like, I mean, and it's funny because like my dad is one of the few that actually vocalizes this quite a bit, where they're like, I hear this sentiment all the time, but I think he's one of the few that I think gets why I do it. Where he's like,
Your dad's a very intelligent guy.
he is, he is, but
He's also very
frustrating.
rigid. Yeah, he could probably be rigid in his thought process.
But it very much so. But it's one of those where he's like, I wish I could be like you, where like you have so many now that you collect, and you're fine with like, I'm going to Atlanta, so I'm going to get the Atlanta Braves because we're going to see a Braves game, or I went to wherever the fuck and I got this thing, and it's like, I wish I could do that. I'm like, you can. He's like, but it has to mean more. And I'm like, no, they don't. Like tattoos don't have, like, they can mean something.
Yeah.
But they don't have to mean the end all be all for everything. Like it doesn't have to be that way.
Piggybacking on that exact same thought, I literally told somebody, they said like, well, it's so permanent. It's the permanent thing. It has to mean something. I go like, it is actually the most impermanent art there is. I was like, it's got a shelf life of a maximum 90 to 100 years. And then unless you literally taxidermy that shit off you, it's dying with you. So, and again, like if it's a religious thing, or like, like you just don't feel you want to do that, fine. I'm going to go, but it is one of the most impermanent art that you can possibly do. People put this like, it's permanent. I go like, dude, like...
And you can get it lasered off.
Like, exactly. It's like, you can get it taken off too. But I'm going to go, nothing is super permanent. It's like, but I go, but I've always, like, you have artwork in your home? I go, that painting that's hanging on your wall is going to last longer than you will. I go, so don't put so much pressure on yourself, Like, here's the thing. If you're not sure, or like, you're a person that... like you
impulsive.
Yeah, exactly. Or you like, you have shirts that you're like, well, I don't know why I go through these phases of being like, I only wear baseball tees, and then like, or I only wear like V-necks. It's like, okay, well, if you're a person that it really, really bugs you to see something that you're not into anymore, maybe be more selective. But if you're a person that just digs something, I always say like, meaning is a great place to start, but I know the minute you get past that, the level of tattoos you're going to get is going to be astounding, because you're going to be more about, I want to see the quality of the work. The meaning is very secondary after that fact. And it's like, I just want something that looks cool.
Well, I mean, that's like even like you and I have talked about because I'm very all over where I'm like, oh, we're working on my leg, but then it's like, I'm like, yeah, and then like I still need to have you
do the inner arm
fill
there
in this fucking spot.
Right.
And then it's like, I've talked to you about like, hey, it'd be fun. Like, I don't hate either of my back pieces. Like, they're just, I think, bigger now, and I would like to see something all the way.
Sure.
And so now I'm just like, fuck it. I think it'd be a fun, creative... I will probably not like you for a lot of the parts on it, but like, I think it'd be a fun, creative process to be like, okay, Chris, I want to challenge you. Let's do a cover-up. What the fuck are you going to come up with to get rid of this and make it better and make it a newer version of where I'm at or whatever, or the new story of where I'm at or whatever.
Right.
And to me, like, that's kind of the fun thing of getting them, is just like, all right, how do you take something like, like with the last one you did, like where you're like, oh, I have, your house is got a hole in the roof, and then you speaking of like, hustling, and you were like, all right, I can pay for the whole thing, like if I decide to work and not go on vacation for the entire time I was looking at doing. And you did,
yeah.
But you got to do one fun thing, because like I looked at that going like, okay, you're so regimented with your schedule, and you have shit you have to do, projects you have planned. This is the fun part as a friend of yours, or a friend of a collector, like a tattoo artist, where it's like, what do you have that you've been sitting on that you haven't gotten to do?
Right.
This is the time to kind of fuck around and do that, because this is now extra time that you weren't planning on.
Right.
So fuck it, let's do something fun.
Right.
Like, I don't care. And they're like, well, I have this piece. And I'm like, all right, I think I got a spot for it. Like, let's figure this out.
That's only the problem that you get to at RHT is like you start running out of room, or you had other pieces thought for those spaces.
But it becomes one of those things where, like, in doing things like that, you essentially, and through our friendship of what you do professionally, has taught me to be a lot more loose in my life and just be like, man, fuck it, let's just, I don't know, let's figure this out. Like, I don't know.
You got one lap at this, man. Might as well make it a good one.
It's it makes it more fun when it's life more fun when it's not so by the books.
That pressure. People put on this unnecessary pressure on themselves. I'm like, why are you putting so much pressure? Like, and that's they go like, oh, it's permanent. I'm like, oh, it's not really. I mean, like, you're not permanent. you're gonna go. I'm like, sorry.
Well, at this point, I feel like we're circling back too much to things we've talked about.
Sure.
I'm going to ask you one last question, and we'll see if this weirdly comes back to anything else we've talked about. But, you had just said, and as I started by saying that, in the time that we've done this the first time, you now have your own tattoo studio. You are the sole artist that works there. It is your thing through and through.
Right.
Now, I know part of how you chose the name.
Yeah.
How long did it take for you to settle on a name that essentially would represent you?
It was one of those that there are so many shops that either do one of two things. They'll do some, I don't want to say lame, but it's just like this. No, I will say it. It's kind of lame, where they'll just do like pain for sale, or it's like, or like slave to the needle, and it's very, and again, like those shops can be good or bad, but like the names were always just like this very, almost an off-putting,
on the nose.
Yeah, very on the nose, chew on the nose. And then there's other ones where it was, it seemed like black sales, or all these other things. So I had to be as honest as I could with myself, because I always wanted to have something that was, I don't want to say authentic to me, because it's not really, because it's still kind of a gimmicky thing, but I was always into video games, and I always played thieves or rogues. And then, I was always kind of a to myself kind of person. So Last Rogue just sounded, it rolled off my tongue, and then I just really liked it. But it's funny is most people think it's a Star Wars reference. And I've had people give me gifts of Star Wars stuff, which I never say no. I've never corrected them, because I'm like, I fucking love Star Wars too, so I don't care. But it's not. It's literally my solitude and my nerddom that I kind of gave homage to, which was just basically Last Rogue. But just to kind of expand a little bit on that, having my own studio is exactly what I wanted, and I love it. But no one tells you that when you are really at the helm, that there's a juggling act that you're not really ready for, where I have to be an artist, a business owner, and also the counter help. I have to be the person that's not only being professional and concise when I'm tattooing, but also professional and articulate and forthcoming when I'm interviewing my clients to see whether or not we're going to do the project. And then I also have to do, bloodborne pathogen and OSHA standards, and do my body art facility licensing, and my insurance, and pay my mortgage, or not really mortgage, but pay my lease and all that stuff. And there's all these facets, and you get into a rhythm of it. But I can see why that, my wife is like, oh, we should make a shop. I'm like, I don't want to add more headache to what I already do, man. I like that it's busy, but it's simple. I've streamlined it to be simple. So, but with that being said, yeah, man, I wouldn't change it for the world. But Last Rogue was, if I would say it had I never thought shop titles. Well, back in the day, a shop name was a household brand, where it's like, a still one here in Grand Rapids is, Mos Eisley's, where it's like
another Star Wars reference.
Right, exactly, another Star Wars reference. But Mos Eisley's, you never heard back in the day, at least when I first got here, you never said I went to blah, blah, blah at Mos Eisley's. People would just say, I go to Mos Eisley's. Exactly, I go to Mos. And so when Matt and I started Plowshare in 2009, I told people, they said, where do you work? Plowshare. And they go, I've never heard of it. And I go, good. I don't want you to know the studio. I want you to know me, because artists make the shop. And that was something that street shop guys never got. I'm like, people don't come here because of the name. They come here because of the freaking level of talent you have under your roof. And so that's why when people hear Last Rogue, I've never heard of that. But then they'll say, and I'm not saying to boast, but they say, well, Christopher Bettley. And they go, well, I've heard of him. Good, because that's what I've made people want to hear. That's the brand that I wanted people to hear in their name. So Last Rogue is just basically my LLC and how I pay my taxes. But it does sound cool. I like it. I like Last Rogue. It sounds sweet.
Since it's been about 5 years, and this is kind of about a full circle sort of moment.
Yeah.
The actual last question I have for you. In the last 5 years, with as much as happened to you, personal life,
to you and me both.
What do you feel has been one of your biggest learning moments, and what did you take away from it that maybe you can bestow to other people?
Getting married to my wife, she brought something into my life that, I like you were talking about like being distant and, not being always like, present in a lot of people's lives. My wife reminded me, like she's a social bug and she loves being around people, but straight up, like she brought me closer to my family, than I've ever been in my entire life, and I could never repay her for that. And she did remind me, and what we were just talking about too, when you get older and you get to that kind of mid-mark or halfway mark, it's not to say that only family matters and all that bullshit. I mean, I don't know why. I hate when people say shit like that. I hate when people are like, oh, at the end of the fucking time, it's only just your family and your children. I'm like, bullshit. Like, there is so many things I've done in my life that I'm so proud of. Do I think that family's extraordinarily important? Absolutely. But I always go off on tangents. But like back to like the central thrust of this. My wife is the one that gave me the biggest learning moment where she said, Chris, they're not going to be here forever. Your friends, your family, none of it. Now, I'm not saying you have to like change your entire life and, be this guy that's just going to like do a 180 and like, oh, it's all about family. She goes like, but make fucking time for them. Make some goddamn time. And it's the best advice I've ever gotten from anybody. Because she's right, and being closer to my grandfather and my papa and my mom and friends and stuff like that, because of how much she pushes me into that direction, I'll never be able to repay her for that. It was great. She's amazing for doing that. She's a butthole too, so she's kind of a butthole too, but I love her. I wouldn't trade her for the world.
Well, on that note, I feel like this has been a Rogan-esque epic 300.
Dude, we went everywhere. We touched about every subject, I think, across the board.
So I just poured my Deftones tequila.
Oh, is this that tequila? Oh, shit, man.
Deftones tequila, bottle 116 out of 2002.
Can I say this before we cheers this? Back to how I started, man. It's like, I'm really proud of you, man. Like 300 episodes. For anyone who doesn't know, I work really hard, okay? But John is one of those that he's working when he's not working. He's always, he just gave me the look like, yeah, fuck yeah, I am. He's always thinking of how can he better it? How can he make it more engaging? How can he make it, and it's not through a lens of like, how can I get more on me? He's just saying, how can I make this more enjoyable for everyone? And that's really what I respect about him. And that's what I pushed him back in Mulligan's,
2016. November of 2016.
Yeah, forever ago to do this. And I couldn't be more proud of you, brother. And I'm so happy. Here's
Thank
the 300.
you so much, man.
Anytime, brother.
So that was my conversation with Christopher Bettley. Again, I really want to thank Chris for taking 2.5 hours that you actually heard, and then another, I think we talked for like another probably 45 minutes after that. It's just one of those things where, like I said in the intro, and I think if you can kind of get the vibe from that 2.5 hours of us just kind of going back and forth, there's just something magical about when you're able to, like I said, open up to somebody and not be afraid to talk about some things. We started kind of off right away talking about therapy and how it's helped both of us. I can definitely say there is a very not so long ago time where Chris would have never fucking admitted that, let alone on a podcast, let alone commenting on a mutual friend's Facebook page about something that would help them. But I think that's the thing is that I've loved seeing about Chris lately in his life, especially since, getting married. Chris and I have always talked about how, for me and my wife, that we balance each other out really well. And that's what a good marriage is. And that's what a good relationship is you're able to kind of balance each other out. One maybe is a little bit more introverted where the other's an extrovert. And, you're able to kind of pull each other out of your comfort zones and help you both experience a more fulfilling, satisfying life. And I think Chris does that for me, like in a friendship way. Like, I love seeing that his wife, who is a little bit younger than him and is a little bit more adventurous than he is at times, it's great to see her pull him out of his shell and get him to go do more things with people. And I think the adverse is really great for her, where I think he has a lot more patience and calmness and just is able to expound upon that for people. He has definitely, for me, allowed me to be a little bit more comfortable with being more in the moment, being present with things, and not just going a million miles an hour. And the crazy thing is that dude, with as booked up as he is and how far he has to work and get things done, it would be so easy for him to actually get lost in the what's coming down the road. To not think about today, to think about tomorrow, because I got to do this project, I got to get this drawing done, I got to call this client back, I got to do all these things. But he doesn't. He's always present. And even when he's tattooing, and that's one of the other things, is I feel like you can tell a lot about a person in the intimacy of getting tattooed. And Chris has definitely been in some very weird positions tattooing me, where, like, you know, he's right on top of me, and we spend many, many hours with him, basically, as you know, I say, inflicting a lot of pain, the pain of friendship, basically. And, you know, he always makes you feel safe. He makes you feel comfortable as best you can. And it's not even necessarily in anything he says. It's just kind of his calming presence. And Chris is one of those that ever since I've known him, he doesn't necessarily speak a lot, but when he does, the weight of those words just carries so much. Like I said, this is one of my favorite people in my life. And I hope you kind of get a glimpse into why. Like I said, I know this was actually a lot more of me kind of working through some of my shit, but I think, like I said, that is more of a snapshot of what Chris and I's relationship is kind of like, is helping each other because of just not being afraid to be us around each other. Episode 300, I really have to thank Chris for pushing me to do this. I definitely don't think 5 years ago, sitting in a bar, I felt that I was worthy of carrying a show that anyone would care what I have to say, my opinions, my thoughts. And Chris was able to show me and tell me why we all deserve those things. We all deserve to have our voices be heard, have those platforms. And it's definitely one of those things where I'm tremendously thankful and indebted to our friendship. I really hope you enjoyed this. We have plenty more episodes already done. Literally did a conversation the next day with Andrew from Idola that was equally as rewarding for me. Can't say enough good things. So I am going to wrap this episode up. It's long enough as it is. I'll stop blabbing. Simply enough. If you would like to keep up with Christopher Bettley, you can find him on Facebook at Last Rogue Tattoo. His Instagram handle is at Christopher Bettley, and Twitter, which pretty much does not use, is at Last Rogue Tattoo. Feel free to follow his work, see what he's doing, see why he is one of the most in-demand artists here in not only really Michigan, but just kind of in the area. He is just one of the best people I know. And I love being able to present some of those people maybe you don't know. And maybe now you're going to find a new artist, and maybe you're going to come down here to Grand Rapids. You're going to get a tattoo by him, or if he does any of the conventions, you're going to go and get something awesome by him. And as he said, you're going to have a piece of him travel with you forever, or until you die, because getting a tattoo isn't permanent, because you will cease to exist with it on you at some point. So all those things said, that is where you can find Christopher Bettley. He is not super active on socials, but give him a follow. It's always entertaining at the very least. And last but not least, for us, you can find all things Brutally Speaking at brewspeakpod.com. This is the landing page for a reason. Anything you need to see or know about us, it is there. Want to thank our sponsors again for the continued support, 300 episodes, and hopefully for the next 300 as well. Want to thank Rockabilia. Go to rockabilia.com and use our code BREW and take 10% off your total purchase order. On Point Pomade, keep your beard and hair looking on point. Use our code BSP15 and take 15% off your total purchase order. And last but not least is the Bean Bastard Coffee. Head on over to thebeanbastard.com, pick up some delicious fresh ground coffee. And for episode 300, I'm John. We'll talk to you next week, where we are joined by Matt Carter of Emory. Talk to you then.
Oh, that fucking sucked. Shao Kahn, what'd you think?
That was pathetic.
Yeah. Coach, what'd you think?
Fucking embarrassing!
Okay. I mean, I knew it was gonna fucking suck, but I think those guys were a little rude. Austin Powers?
How about no?
Okay, I thought we were going to get the Austin Powers vote. We did not. John, use that for your podcast. It fucking sucks. But you knew what you were getting into. It will result in less listens. You're going to see a decline in listeners if you start the show with that. You're going to see 30 seconds in, the number will plummet. And I will be there at the bottom of the plummet saying, I fucking told you. Don't use this fucking riff. It sucks.